it Black Lives Matter, whether we called it the Occupy, whether we called it our revolution, this has all been for the sake of working people everywhere. One of the things, though, if we're going to talk about moving beyond 2020, that's so critical. You know, I work as a mental health specialist in Contra Costa County, and so for me, mental health, our emotional well-being is so important. And this year, it seemed, you know, it all culminated into what we're seeing now. The candidate that we believed in and believe in still, in many cases, you know, ended his bid for the presidency, which, you know, for me personally, I can only speak for me personally, that was heartbreaking, because, you know, we really all wanted to see just stay in the race. What do you have to lose? What do we have to lose to quit now? And so it was heartbreaking for many of us. We don't know what his reason was. All I can say is that I believe that for a man who has worked his entire political career, you know, and been in the fight, I can only, you know, surmise that I like to think he was threatened, right? I'm going to make a joke here because it's not funny, but you know, you kind of have to wonder, right? Was he threatened? Was his family threatened? What the heck happened? And so many of us are heartbroken by that. I remember during the Black Lives Matter movement, and Sandra Bland was killed at the hands of police, right? Many of us on social media, you know, we started a hashtag, basically, like, if I were to ever die, because you know me, you know, you all know me, you know how tirelessly I fought for justice, right? And so if I were to land in the hands of a police and they said I killed myself, no, I did not kill myself. So if I ever die in the hands of police, know that I did not commit suicide, right? So did anybody remember that, just by show of hands, people saying that? Right, we said that. So I can only would love to imagine that if you ever catch me endorsing Joe Biden, and then it was probably because I was threatened. So I like to think that of this man, right, who has fought tirelessly for social justice and justice everywhere, that, you know, they just kind of cave in like that. But I say all that to say that it's about that we now have to move on, but our mental health, our emotional well-being is so important, because it can feel like such such a crush, and it can and it feels like, you know, hope has been just, you know, sucked away from us by the establishment, by, you know, this corrupt system that we are watching every day. So for me, it's important that we as activists take care of ourselves, do what we need to do, grieve. Yeah, I grieved over the fact that, you know, the hope that I had in this one person, although it's always not been about him, but we you know, when we are real about it, it was about him in a sense, because he was the one running to be in that position to be our voices. And so, you know, I had to grieve that. And I urge you all, you know, take some time to grieve. It's been, you know, the other side, they don't seem to get tired. They don't seem, you know, it's one thing after the other. Now we're in this pandemic and they are still not taking a break. So for us, you know, they're taking away our rights, you know, as we grieve, you know, friends and acquaintances. And so we have to do what we can. I urge you as activists, you know, get out and walk. Do things that make you laugh, because laughter is healing. Because if we are sick and we get sick, then it makes it really difficult for us to continue this fight, correct? So do whatever you have to do to grieve, do whatever you have to do to get past the grief, do whatever you have to do to heal, whether it be through dance, whether it be through laughter. It's such a critical thing. But activism as we know it is, at this point in time, is sort of dead, right? Because we as grassroots activists, we know what has been so effective is the ability to have these, these person-to-person contact, person-to-person conversations. And so that is not going to be the case, particularly in the 2020 election, because we were not going to have that opportunity to go and knock on our neighbors' doors. But activism will and must continue through these types of avenues, through the video conferencing, through telephone calls. I think social media is going to have to play a major role in how we connect with other individuals, with other people. We're going to have to get very creative. Let's see. Thank you. I've been keeping track of the time. We're going to have to get very creative in how we do that. But the movement beyond 2020, we have to look at ourselves, each other, to maintain the power. How we do that? There's been so much talk about the need for us as progressives to coalesce, to bring our individual power and brilliance to the table. One of the things that, like it or not, that we saw happen in this race was how the moderate centrists, they came together. And we as progressives, we tend to, we're not puppets. And so we all have different ways of being, and even to say different types of ideas. And so, when it comes to the values that we have and that we share, even those values, we still have to argue about them oftentimes, right? But when we see how, moderates and conservative, they stick together, and that is one of the issues that I think that we are going to have to work on. And in that, whether we have different views on how we get to from point A to B, we may have different ideas of how we're going to do that, but we still have to come together and stick together in ways that we've never seen before. I think we are the only group of folks who we argue amongst each other and we get mad at each other. And even someone like Bernie, who we've seen at the forefront of all this and been in the trenches, we're so quick to call him a sellout, right? As progressives, we're so quick to do that, as opposed to saying, okay, not sure what happened here. I'm mad, I'm pissed off about it, but we still don't need to be fighting amongst each other, because we do that. We do that so often. So the movement beyond 2020, we really are going to have to coordinate much more succinctly. We're going to have to collaborate so much better than we have. And I'm hopeful that we can do that, because in every single movement, I've seen us become, I've seen the way that we've been able to strategize and come together. I've seen that those movements get better in time. And so whatever that next step is, and whatever it is that we call it, we really have to put our differences aside for the good of the whole. And I think I can stop there. And I don't know, I mean, if this is a time for questions, or it'll be after all the panelists speak, but I think this is a good stopping point.
Great. Thank you so much, Jovanka. I don't know how to clap in this environment, but I'm going to give you the thumbs up in the window. Okay.
Thank you.
Yes. I feel like you really captured so much of the feeling that we've all had. Because we have 3 or 4 minutes before our next speaker, I will let people type into the chat box if you have any questions. But first, I wanted to acknowledge that we have Council Member Cheryl Dambulla has joined us. I'm going to see if I can unmute you for a second so you can say hello. But oh, there you are.
Hi there. Good evening, everyone. I'm not putting my camera on, but it's nice to see everyone. And thank you, Jovanka. That was amazing. Yeah, I mean, literally, I was sick that morning when my daughter gave me the news about Bernie. So it is a time to grieve. We have so many reasons, unfortunately, but but you know, we also can look at what this pandemic has done in a positive way. It's uniting people. It's bringing families together, although some of them might still have to be dealing with some domestic violence issues. But it's like getting us cooking, getting us talking to our family members, and realizing that we can all get along and be in the house for like 6, 8 weeks, 10 weeks, 12 weeks at a time, and not, you know, live through it. And, you know, we have blue skies again. We have free buses. We have, you know, just like all the structural and institutional and systemic marginalizations of people, African Americans, Latinx, everybody is coming to the forefront, so that now it's everybody has to think about it. And I'm hoping that the world will make an adjustment and that we can be one world and try to get through this pandemic and the climate catastrophes or issues that we might face in the future. So it is a time to unite, and virtually, of course, and just try to just stay focused, stay calm, stay home, and just reflect and become united with our neighbors, our families, and the world at large. Thank you very much for the opportunity.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you both for joining us. I think we can move on now. I see Alan is there waiting. So I wanted to introduce Alan by saying that he's PDA's National Executive Director. He works tirelessly for the cause. He's also a very well-known, well-respected radio journalist here in Los Angeles, KPFK. He's become a very close friend and somebody I really respect and admire, both for his ability to see the big picture and also to reach down for better grassroots connection to the people. Alan, I am going to now scroll and try to unmute you. Yes, there we go.
Hello, everyone. Thumbs up. People can hear me okay? Good. I'm going to start out with maybe not the most winning anecdote relevant to a Bay Area politician for this crowd. But as I told Hemming, I go a ways back with Kamala Harris, so far back that I potentially played with her in a crib, because I was born at Alta Bates Hospital, and my father was her father's professor at University of California, Berkeley. Unfortunately, my family moved from Berkeley when I was still an infant, though perhaps Kamala was born about 9 months before me, so maybe we got to play in the cribs, who knows. And they remained friends for quite a while. Her father actually is a fantastic radical economist who was on Stanford faculty for years. Great politics, much better than his daughter's politics, I think. I'm actually been invited onto a number of PDA calls with chapters, and I'm really happy that on this one, it's not all about PDA and our structures, but I'll always be happy to join the Oakland chapters and San Francisco Bay Area chapters, East Bay and San Francisco, or any of the other chapters in Northern California to talk about PDA. So yeah, I had written an article that was posted on Common Dreams the day before Bernie announced, and it was called "Bernie Sanders Needs to Stay in the Race. We Need Him Now More Than Ever," or something like that. And it went really, really viral. The day before, Norman Solomon had published an article that had a similar message, and mine got in only a few hours before Bernie announced, and I was so happy with the response. Norman's article got an incredible response. My article got biggest response of anything that I'd posted on a site like Common Dreams for quite a while. So I went to bed that night pretty content that I was doing my best, and maybe I had convinced myself because I'd made such a strong argument, and there were so many reasons why I felt that Bernie needed to stay in the race. And very sadly, just before this call, 2 hours ago, and I don't know if you all saw it, Bernie had one of his town halls. And he had a town hall with Senator Elizabeth Warren and Pramila Jayapal and Mark Pocan about a progressive response to the COVID crisis. And one of the things I said in that article was I felt Bernie needed to stay in the race because as long as he had the platform of the presidential campaign and the establishment was hating him for it and worried about it, he had a huge platform, and that the platform would diminish once he was no longer a candidate. I think he lost sight of that, because imagine if he had Elizabeth Warren on while he was still a candidate, even if she hadn't endorsed or anything like that. The amount of press it would have received, the focus on the messaging, and then the great messaging from the two heads of the CPC as well. And this thing, even just on the platform I was watching it, had about 1/3 the audience that any of his town halls were having before he stopped the campaign. So on just so many fronts, I think it's just a tragedy. And of course, and I don't know if people have seen the polls, but Medicare for All, not surprisingly, because people are smart, is now among Democratic, self-identified Democrats, it's now up at 88% support in the latest poll from a Harris and Hill X poll. I think Harvard does the backbone of that poll. The other poll that came out a few weeks earlier had it again soaring. It's now at 69% approval among the general public. What political party in the world goes forward with a nominee in the signature debated issue during the primaries, and he is running counter to the absolute overwhelming majority of the party's membership? And again, going back to Bernie dropping out, I felt that if we got further into this crisis, now imagine, even if he was as far behind as he is right now after Ohio, of course, he'd be a little less far behind because he would have stayed in and done a little better in a few of the states that have occurred. But even so, he'd be about 350, 400 delegates behind with a month to build up a campaign to support Medicare for All with all these big states coming up. I mean, I'm not saying he could win that, but boy, he could win some of those primaries. And that would really send a message. And we really could possibly get Biden having to say, I support Medicare for All. Right now, do I believe a lot of what Joe Biden says as he's sort of saying he's going to support somewhat more progressive policies? I'll just let that hang and say he's meeting with Larry Summers and stuff like that. So I'm pretty skeptical. But look, here's one of the signature things about going forward in the progressive movement going forward. We have two amazing things on our side. I mean, this is very broad stroke. The younger you get in the population, the more the progressive left agenda is supported. I mean, you know, statistics on the political beliefs of high school students are always hard to really take at face value, but apparently they're even more progressive than the people who graduated from high school age into college age over the last 4 years. So as that population grows up, right now, the support for a left progressive agenda that really only appeared on the national stage with the Bernie Sanders campaign in 2016 is just growing. And I do believe it's even growing more and accelerated in its growth by the COVID-19 crisis, okay? So those are the two actually, the generational advantage and the policy advantage. So those are, you know, if this was a level playing field, which it isn't, because of money in politics, power, entrenched institutional issues, and the fact that, private wealthy people and corporations own almost all of the essential resources in our society. But if it was a more level playing field, we'd be feeling pretty good about our movement going forward, just on those two things. Now, of course, there's a long history of people who were younger, and I suppose this is a little note to the baby boomers, of course, having very progressive politics, growing older, but this is going very deep into the population. I mean, you're talking about up into the 40s and 50s. And when you actually look not at who the people were voting for in the primary, who they were supporting, when you go on policy, it runs pretty deep. And so we have policy and a generational advantage going forward. So the question is it possible with those two amazing assets for our movement, who we are losing with Bernie Sanders, and there's no prospect of a 2024 Bernie Sanders presidential campaign. We are losing a leader who was able to bring this unified platform to public attention like no other politician over the last 3 or 4 decades, and really to some degrees even before that. And there's no doubt that a presidential election focuses the attention of the public on politics and broad society-wide political issues more than anything else that we can have. So we are losing Bernie Sanders, but we have those two advantages I noted. And the question then is, how then do we take those assets, the loss of Bernie? We do have some now prominent national celebrity politicians who obviously support the Bernie Sanders agenda, and most prominently the members of the squad, but also, someone like Pramila Jayapal is a real up-and-coming celebrity, and all over metropolitan areas in the country. There are Javanka Beckles, who, the grassroots knows and loves and can move into positions of leadership as our movement matures. And again, we have the policies, we have a generational advantage. We don't right now have the clear political structures, and we do have a network now of national organizations, mass membership organizations that are aligned with the Bernie Sanders agenda. Now, that's sort of the plus side. The downside is, I think, a couple things. Actually, I want to take a very brief aside about the UK, because obviously we go back just 5 years, and out of nowhere we had these two septuagenarian boomers, and actually Bernie's older than being a boomer, ascend into positions of national prominence with basically a radical social democratic or democratic socialist agenda. And in the UK, they got much closer than we got here to winning state power. And it was even more threatening because they have a unicameral government. So if a Corbynite Labour Party was to win a majority, they really could push through the agenda, though it's unclear whether the Parliamentary Labour Party would have supported that once he was elected. He got really close, he didn't get there. And if you look at the situation there now for the Corbyn movement, which seemed like going into the last general election, at least had assured itself a position of prominence for the next few years, well, that didn't play out. They had a terrible election result, and now it's sort of like going from Bernie Sanders back to, God, who's an analog for Keir Starmer in American politics? I mean, he's better than Biden, but, maybe Cory Booker or somebody like that, right? Or Kamala, right? And if you think about the movement that builds up around national elections, both presidential elections in the United States and the UK general election, and all that, say, momentum could do to mobilize around that, how does that look 5 years from now without those assets? And that's something that, per what Javanka was saying, we have to digest, because it's what we're up against. Presidential elections really, really focus the attention, in the absence of them, of the general public. And we've been able to bring through Bernie and the Bernie movement our agenda to them on the highest profile political stage that we have. How do we maintain the prominence of our policies and the vision of society more broadly that we put forward that is so attractive to people? How do we maintain that in the public eye going forward? And again, that's the big question on the table. And then the second big issue is what we are trying to change. And I think there's a lot that we're trying to change in the United States of America. Obviously, the deep entrenched history of structural racism that has anchored American inequality and the ruling classes' approach to their rule, as it were, throughout American history. And the system specifically of neoliberal financialized capitalism, where you can see just the almost uniform unwillingness to go against the logic of that system with the resistance to Medicare for all. So to bring back a large public funded program, to take it out of the hands of financialized capitalist corporations. The public loves it, and the core of power in the Democratic Party, and of course all of the Republican Party, says no way, no how. The whole apparatus of big funding inside American political campaigns, because the whole structure of the way our society has been organized over these last 4 decades is built around a system that increases wealth inequality, is bad for workers, bad for the working class, and good for the investment class. That's a huge barrier to overcome. And now to go back to the UK, we really saw the ferocity at which they dealt with somebody who was there to reverse that system. Corbyn also was a direct frontal assault on UK foreign policy in an even more explicit way than Sanders. But Bernie was going against that too. And to a certain degree, so is even a politician like Elizabeth Warren, though much less directly than Bernie Sanders. And I think we got a taste of what the establishment will do when we get close to defeating them politically and having somebody become potentially the president of the United States. Or even if the Squad and their allies somehow gain the upper hand and get a majority in one of the legislatures of Congress. I think the fight back from the establishment will be as fierce as what Corbyn experienced, and will be as unified as what Bernie experienced with the South Carolina primary in the 5 days that followed. And I just say that all because that's what we're going to be facing. Norman, this is a good way to hand off to Norman, because Norman's going to talk about the Democratic Party. Paradoxically, and I can't predict what Norman's going to say, but I imagine this will be somewhat echoed. I actually still believe the fight, and not because I have a great partisan love for the Democratic Party, like, you know, if you're a Giants fan, you're always going to be a San Francisco Giants fan, you're going to hate the Dodgers. It's not like that. I love however we can get there to achieve the social, economic, political, and justice transformations that we need in American society. But right now, the fight within the Democratic Party and the beachhead that was won because of the Sanders campaign is worth preserving, because if that's abandoned, it's an incredible loss to us. It can be something conceivably that we can win support for, especially with the generational array that I described as I started. And so it's very important to defend the beachhead inside the Democratic Party. We don't know where that will go, but to preserve that and to try to continue to win public policy victories through the Democratic Party, at least at this hour, remains an essential task in my assessment. And I think those are my comments for now, because it hands off well to what I think Norman's going to talk about. And I love you all, and thank you for being here.
Thank you, Alan. Thank you for all of your work. You are a tremendous leader for us. I just wanted to direct to you a few questions, and then I want to introduce someone, and then the next speaker is Jane Kim. So we had a question earlier to you specifically, whether or not you thought that there's any way that Biden could actually not make it to the nomination.
My understanding is he's appearing on Morning Joe tomorrow. Can people nod their heads? Is that correct? And I suppose this is going to be about Tara Reid. I think that's what's anticipated. I mean, look, I think this could trip him up, so we'll know more in a while. I'm sure the whole, the entire weight of the establishment PR apparatus will be there to defend him. And I don't think we'll get a lot of pushback from the Republican PR apparatus against Biden because they probably view him as pretty wounded and defeatable, so they don't really want to see a stronger candidate get put forward. So, incredibly cynically, I think he'll survive this, which is horrifying. Yeah, so there's that, and then there are the health issues, but that's it. And then, yeah, I mean, Bernie doesn't look like he's unsuspending his campaign, so Medicare for all can be at 99%, and they, including Bernie Sanders, are all endorsing Joe Biden. Yeah, I don't know what to say about I don't know how the audience here feels about the Tara Reade situation, but it's baffling to me, the rationalizations that can be made by the establishment.
So the second question to you from Councilmember Davila is, how do you get those who don't even want to vote for Biden and won't vote for number 45? What do you say to those folks?
Well, we're all here in California, right? No, actually, I saw somebody's in Detroit, and somebody was from another place you mentioned earlier, Nebraska. I don't know, it's very hard to digest. And I really did feel like, the people who are beating up on Bernie supporters online and really prodding them, say you're going to support Biden, now it's still not time to really press Bernie supporters and progressives about supporting Joe Biden. I mean, Joe Biden's record on so many fronts, especially on the key points where he pushed across his career, and that's even without, Larry Summers in the picture and Tara Reade in the picture. It's pretty horrible, and it doesn't match up with the policies that we want to see, even the ones that aren't really transformative, moving away from neoliberalism. So, obviously we'll go through a few months, and if Joe Biden remains the nominee and it's him versus Donald Trump, which is just such a sorry commentary itself on the, where our political culture is in America through the establishment lens. We'll go through everything around Supreme Court seats and all of the issues and acknowledging climate change and all that stuff. And it will all probably feel differently about it if it all comes to that in a few months. And then I'll feel the question again. I think that's a good answer.
Okay.
A good non-answer.
Thank you for the beautiful non-answer. Thank you, Alan Minsky, for all of your work. Before we go to Jane Kim, I just wanted to quickly acknowledge that we have Mariko, and she is our former Assemblywoman, Mariko Yamada. I'm looking for where you are so I can unmute you briefly, and you can say hello to us. I feel so blessed that you're here. There you are.
Hi, thank you very much. Well, good evening. I'm sorry I'm a little late to the party here, but I'm very, very thankful to be able to join you. And hi, Jane and everyone. And wow, in all my years, I don't think we would have expected to have been at this place in our society, in our world right now. But, we're just going to have to get through it, and who knows what's going to happen even in the next hour. So that's why I'm glad to be here with you so I can get re-energized. So I hope everyone's doing as well as can be expected. And thank you so much. I really appreciate Rusko Kayangyang especially for including me tonight, and of course Jane and all of you. And thank you for all your hard work all through the years.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Wonderful to see you here. Okay, and with that, I would like to introduce a very good friend and mentor of mine. Jane Kim was, I think, the youngest member of the Board of Supervisors of the Board of Education in San Francisco. I think she was 25, and she went on to becoming president of the board and was one of our greatest advocates as a supervisor in San Francisco, and recently ran for mayor. And she did a tremendous job as Bernie Sanders' 2020 California director. And I'm just so pleased and honored to present Jane after I find her name and unmute her. Hi, Jane. You can speak now.
Okay, great. Well, first of all, it's really an honor to have Mariko Yamada on as an Asian American woman in progressive politics. A few mentors, and Mariko is one of them. And she was running as a democratic socialist in 2016 before it was a term. I mean, that it's become today. And she served on our assembly prior to that and our YOLO board of supervisors as a social worker. Thank you so much for having me. I don't plan to take up my entire time. I don't have a presentation, but I did want to talk a little bit about some of what we saw here in the state of California for Bernie 2020, what I think some of the next best steps are. And then if folks can just start posting questions on the chat room, I will do the best that I can to track it. And Hemming, I did see your first question about the delegate process and what we can do to encourage activists to keep going after the suspension of the senator's campaign. So for those of you that are not familiar with me, I currently am the National Regional Political Director for the campaign. We are winding down the operations, and prior to that, I served as the California Political Director. As you all know, we kicked ass in the state. We won 47 out of 53 congressional districts. And what we saw was that when we are on the ground, we win. And one of my takeaways, and I'm not saying that this is something that I could have said in June when I started on the campaign, but one of my takeaways is that when we have the resources to be on the ground, when we are door knocking, when we are talking to voters, we win. And in fact, out of 4 out of the 5 early states, South Carolina being the only exception, when we were door knocking, we won in every single one of those states. And what we typically see, and I think that this was not an incorrect strategy on the senator's part, is that when you win the early states, that momentum carries you through, and in most cases, you become the nominee of the Democratic Party. That is not what we saw happen on March 3rd. Out of 14 states, Biden won 10. We won 4. We, of course, won the biggest one, which was California. But I think all of us on the campaign were taken aback by the accelerated kind of consolidation of the centrist moderate Democrats really within 24 hours. And when we lost South Carolina, which I was not expecting to win, and Biden won, I honestly thought it was too late for the vice president. And even when Buttigieg and Klobuchar and other candidates quickly consolidated to endorse Biden 24 hours before Super Tuesday, I thought it was too late to move thousands and thousands of voters to kind of consolidate. But it happened. And I think that, we had a number of really hard decisions to make about how to move forward. And then COVID-19 happened. And our strongest selling point, which was being at the doors and talking about Bernie and explaining his agenda, was something that we could no longer do. And I know that the senator was committed to going at least all the way through the New York State primary on April 28th. It was a state we thought we could win. But when that election got moved to June, I think a lot of conversations had to move forward. Now, I was not in the room on those conversations. So when I say we, I don't mean I was sitting in the room making those decisions. This is just kind of my understanding from outside of the room in terms of what happened. And so 2 things held us back. One was, of course, the kind of the cascade of the results that occurred in March. And then the second was our inability to hold the rallies and to be at the doors. And what I found, because I was also at the doors, because it was part of the California team's philosophy that no matter what your position was, that you had to go door knock every week, that no one was too good to door knock. All of our volunteers are door knocking, we're door knocking as well. So I door knocked every weekend. And what I found was that if you could just talk to people and explain what Medicare for All meant, that everyone was like, oh yeah, that makes so much sense. That's actually just really pragmatic. It's not radical. The media was not doing that job for us, obviously. And so we're in states like Texas that I thought we would do better in, that we didn't have the ground troops or the resources the way we invested in California, we clearly did not do as well. Now that's just my kind of amateur analysis of what happened. moving forward, what do I think? Well, first of all, in our previous conversation, we talked a little bit, or Alan talked a little bit about, you know, the candidates that can continue to move this movement forward. And, you know, we didn't know who AOC was in 2016. So we really don't know what other elected leaders are going to emerge out of this 2020 cycle. But already there are some incredibly interesting races just happening here in the state of California that we should be looking at. If the White House and that race is not interesting to you, let's look at other races down the ballot. We have Abigail Medina, who is running in Central Valley for state senate. She came in first place in the primary, which I did as well in 2016. And we got to make sure that she wins in November against her Republican opponent, and that she's the young Latina that we see in Sacramento, because we really just don't have enough of those leaders in Sacramento. The state legislature, and I'm preaching to the choir here, is so important, and progressives and liberals and Democrats do not invest enough in these down ballot races. DSA is an exception to this. Actually, DSA spends a lot more time on down ballot races than, you know, the congressional. I appreciate, but I think we as a cohort are not disciplined in making sure that we focus on these races. State legislatures across the country has 2 to 3 times as many bills as Washington, D.C. Congress has largely been deadlocked for the last 20 years. And meanwhile, states have increasingly been playing the leadership role around legislating and governing. And we're seeing this with COVID-19 as well. Like, we're not looking to Trump. In fact, gosh, we really shouldn't look at Trump. We're looking at our governors and our mayors to see what they're doing and how they're leading. And so the local and the state is so important. But when you think about the policies that impact us on an everyday basis, whether it is public education, sentencing reform and criminal justice reform, even access to reproductive health, most of those decisions are happening at the state level. It's not happening in Congress. It's not happening at the White House. They're pontificating. Congress is a great kind of pedestal or perch by which to talk about things, but the laws are actually being passed in state capitals across the country, state capitals that most Americans cannot even name. And so for those reasons, I think that these are the races that we should continue to invest in. And one other pitch I'll make, and this is something that I started thinking a lot about after I led the voter protection work for the state of California, is how important Secretary of States are. And after the March 3rd primary, we're lucky here in California, by the way, we have some of the best voting laws in the country. And even then it was difficult. I did some research and I found that out of 50 states, there are only 7 states that have a Democrat as a Secretary of State. So not even progressive, but just Democrats. 7 out of 50 states have Democratic Secretaries of States. So meanwhile, we have 43 other states led by Republicans. And we know that there's so much discretion and latitudes that Secretary of States get to execute laws and policies, no matter how good or how terrible they are. One example, of course, is in the Georgia race in 2018, where Stacey Abrams ran against Kemp, who was the Secretary of State at the time. That should not be the case, that someone can both be administering the election and running in it, but it happens. I get it. And he's meanwhile purging voters every 3 weeks from the voter rolls in Georgia. And you know where he's purging them? He's largely purging them in low-income rural African-American communities so that they can't vote for Stacey. So one of the things that I'd love to see a focus on across the country are Secretary of State races. We don't have that many in 2020, but we definitely have one in Montana. There's only one Democrat running. He's young. We should be looking at supporting him in that race, because Montana is actually a state that we can win. It's a smaller state. It utilizes less, it needs less resources. It's more like running actually like in the city and county of San Francisco, frankly. And it's a state that we should be invested in. Okay, I wanna go to questions. And also I would love to hear from you in terms of how we can think about retaining the infrastructure that we built over the last 8 months in California. It's an infrastructure that you have been building for the last 4 years, but we invested millions of dollars in California. And so having full-time staff, you know, having kind of, we started out, I think, with 8 full-time staffers. We eventually grew to about 105 by January. We were able to really fund an infrastructure and bring together organizations and volunteers in a way that I have never seen before in the state of California. And one of my interests is keeping this coalition going to continue to win. We won the state. We did not lose California. We won the state. The second thing that I'll say is that we don't always win candidates, but we are winning on the policy agenda. So as Alan had mentioned, we are winning on Medicare for All. In fact, we were winning before COVID-19. Medicare for All was popular. Yet Bernie wasn't winning in the same states that Medicare for All was polling highly in. And so there's often a disconnect for voters around the issue and the candidate. And I'm a perfect example of that as well. I did not eventually win the state Senate race in 2016 in November, but I won the first revenue measure to make San Francisco the only city in the nation to make community college free for all of our residents, tuition free for all of our residents. In 2018, I also lost the mayor's race, but I won a $140 million commercial gross receipts revenue measure to make childcare affordable for every single family in San Francisco, right? So losing isn't always losing. And I think that that's an important reminder for us, is to think about how we win, even if we're losing candidates electorally. I want to talk about delegates, and then I just want to answer questions. And sorry, I haven't had time to read it while I'm talking. On the delegates, I was not involved in this process from the beginning to the end. So I have to tell you that I'm going to give you my understanding of what happened early in February and March when everyone was applying. When COVID-19 came into place, my understanding is that the CDP asked all of the campaigns to reduce the number of applicants that could run for each congressional district based on the minimum that is slotted. So in Congressional District 13, Barbara Lee's district, where many of you reside, we had 95 applicants that wanted to run for 3 delegate slots. The CDP asked all the campaigns to reduce the number of people who could even run to 3 times slots available. So in CD13, that would be 9 slots, or 9 candidates for 3 slots, meaning that we had to pick 9 out of 95 candidates that could run. At a certain point, the selection becomes really random, because out of 95 people, probably 40 of those 95 people door knock every single weekend for the campaign. And out of that, 40, I bet 30 or 20 of them had been significantly engaged and involved for the last 4 years. So there was no good way to select people. One of the tiers that we used was race, age, gender, of course, being non-binary, making sure that we had the most diverse set of applicants moving forward. And because we did not have very many people of color that ran in more rural parts of California, we had to overcompensate in places like Oakland and San Francisco, where we would over-select, if you want to say, people of color, folks that identified as transgender, LGBT, etc. In some cases, candidates may have been selected over another simply because they filled out an additional internal application form. I think you're aware that there was both the CDP application and Bernie 2020 also had their own application. So simply by filling out an additional layer, that might have gotten you through the process. I'll be honest with you, there were some congressional districts where there weren't enough, or there were exactly enough people that applied. But the Bay Area was by far the most competitive. So, I mean, no other district had as many candidates as Barbara Lee's congressional district. So congratulations to CD13 for making that job really hard for us. Now, the other thing I really want to explain, and apparently Rusty Hicks is now saying otherwise, but my understanding, I've never been in these conversations, by the way, with CDP, but what I've been told by the campaign is that the CDP has told each of the campaigns that the caucuses will be held in person. I know the campaign would prefer to do a virtual caucus. If we move to a virtual caucus, everyone can run. That's just the bottom line. So if between now and June 9th, the CDP changes their mind and allows a virtual caucus instead of an in-person caucus, the Bernie Sanders campaign is going to insist that everyone who applied should be able to run. So all 95 candidates can run for those 3 slots. So I hope I answered everyone's questions. Can I just take 30 seconds to scroll through to see what other questions there are?
Yes, go ahead. We're going to move everything back since we're taking questions in between. We'll
Oh,
have
sorry, did I take my time?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I do want to also give a shout out to another amazing elected official on this chat, Berkeley City Councilwoman Cheryl Dambulla. She's also another candidate and elected that came out of the 2016 Bernie Sanders campaign, another person who was inspired to run. There's several of those, Aisha Wahab, City Councilwoman in Hayward. There's a number of elected officials that ran after Bernie lost in 2016. And I'm so excited about the next crop of candidates that will be running after 2020.
That's great.
Oh, so just so someone asked, yes, the CDP is insisting that the caucus happens in person. And I agree that that is not the intelligent thing to do, but that is what my understanding is, that the CDP is insisting that it be in person and not be virtual. So that is what was meant by the email.
Thank you, Jane. Thank you for all of your work, your leadership. People have been really impressed with how well California and the Bay Area were organized. And I tell them over and over again, it's because Jane Kim and Claire Lau really know what they're doing. You worked so hard. Thank you for everything. We really appreciate it. Not every state, not every district was as organized and on the ground with activists as we were. So we really appreciate it.
Claire Lau is amazing.
Claire Lau is amazing.
Her plug.
For those of you who don't know her, she's the founder of San Francisco Bernicrats, and she was also the director of the Bay Area, and she was going to be one of the directors in New York before COVID happened. Next, I'd like to turn our attention to one of the most revered people in our left political world. Norman Solomon is a well-known author. He's the founder of Roots Action, and he's going to be speaking to us about navigating the Democratic Party.
Okay, hey, well, Heyman, thank you so much. And everybody that we've been hearing since 7 o'clock, a great admiration for. I won't take up the time to say why, because I could go on for quite a long time. To carry on first what Jane was talking about a couple of minutes ago, I think that one of the profound progressive messages that has come from the grassroots of Democrats is for public health. And twice the CDP has rescheduled the in-person caucuses at the district level for the National Convention. And I certainly hope that the scheduled in-person gathering in early June will not take place. We saw what happened in Wisconsin, where crazy Republicans in the legislature insisted on it. We saw what happened when, unfortunately, Tom Perez, speaking for the DNC, publicly called for going ahead with in-person elections in the middle of March, including in Illinois. And 72 hours after that happened, the governor of Illinois quite properly ordered shelter in place. So you don't have to be simply relying on hindsight to see that when a party fights for health care for all, it also should be fighting for public health for all in real time. And that includes not contravening what is one of our best tools right now to fight this pandemic, and that is shelter in place. So hopefully we'll see some creative solutions here, whether it's online or whatever voting. A real basic, I think, for losing our way and finding our way is amid all this commotion. You know, there's an old saying, you might feel like you're getting lost, but you won't get lost if you know the blues. And we often are buffeted by so many pressures and sometimes near insanity coming from the White House and elsewhere, mass media, that it's easy to feel that we're, if not lost, then at least really having a difficult time individually or collectively finding our way. I found it helpful, and in talking to people, it seems quite useful to keep in our minds the overarching necessities, the principles as progressives, two of them. One is to always, always fight the right, fight against the xenophobes, the racists, the nativists, the misogynists, those who bring all sorts of bigotry and cruelty to their politics. And they've always been apparently in so-called civilization. They're with us throughout our lifetimes and with particular virulence right now during the era of Trump Republican control over the executive branch and more over, unfortunately, the judicial branch as well. And the other, of course, is to fight for progressive principles for the future, for the human rights as broadly and deeply defined, including healthcare, education, housing, taking care of the young, taking care of the old, protecting the environment, ending what Dr. King called the madness of militarism. And unfortunately, sometimes it's easy to focus on one to the exclusion of the other. And corporate Democrats, quite ineffectually, quite often, will say, oh, well, we're all about defeating Republicans. And when they jettison progressive politics, then they've damaged both of our goals. Progressive populism is the best way to fight bogus, racist, supposed populism coming from the right, and at the same time fails to accomplish anything that we can be proud of. And of course, everything we can be proud of has always come from the grassroots. So to me, that's a helpful pair of crucial goals at all times to keep as our guiding stars. And that to me now helps to remind us that we are unable now to foresee a decent future that can be created in the next few years without getting rid of the Trump presidency. And at the same time, it's that if we simply fold into the Biden campaign and all that campaign promises or foreshadows to represent, then our other imperative of fighting for a progressive future is simply going to be subsumed and again thrown overboard. So in a sense, we're in a battle between, or we're seeing, or we have on the near horizon, a battle between, you might say, neoliberalism and neo-fascism. And so we know that one is worse than the other, but we want to overcome the neoliberal model that has encouraged and actually fed the kind of right-wing pseudo-populism that we're now suffering from so much. I think it's fair to say that so many people on the left have been, at best, ambivalent about the Democratic Party, quite often so angry that hostility takes over. And there's certainly good reason for that. And I'm at an age where I learned to despise the Democratic Party because it was the party of Lyndon Johnson taking us through the horrors of the Vietnam War and trying to normalize those political justifications. And since then, we've had 8 years of the Clinton administration, we had 8 years of the Obama administration, clearly better than the Republican presidencies that they bracketed. But at the same time, I think it's essential for us at this historic moment to see how we have to make a choice to articulate a different kind of vision that also parallel with and in a tactical alliance with the mainstream of the Democratic Party fights the right wing. And it's no coincidence that if we look at two pivotal years, there's so much in common, 1994 and 2010. And what do those 2 years profoundly have in common? Well, they were 2 years into a new presidential administration, Democratic politician in the Oval Office. And in the years of 1993 and 1994, and then in the years of 2009 and 2010, we had new Democratic presidential incumbents who were willing to talk about fighting for Main Street, but sided with Wall Street and failed to deliver for people who we were told they had been elected to serve and that they were dedicated to serve. And so certainly Joe Biden is absolutely in that mold, if not in some ways more predictably worse. And at the same time, so many activists who have been inspired by and worked for Bernie 4 years ago, and again for the last year, we are, as Jovanka said, we're heartbroken. And we see the way in which the victor is getting the spoils, the way that the Democratic National Convention is being carved up. And if you look at the deal that was struck, that was announced this morning, I mean, it's understandable. It's not a criticism of Bernie, but it doesn't look good. And we have some limited options that we're going to need to, I think, explore and creatively organize around. So as we do that, I think that our role as activists is so crucial. And one of the reasons is that the mass media, which was the biggest obstacle to Bernie's campaign, 4 years ago, we were told it was the DNC, and the DNC was terrible, terribly unfair. And certainly the mass media were unfair, but the main obstacle this time, I think, was the corporate media in terms of Bernie. But we, as activists, we need to be here, and we really are. And PDA is just a great, wonderful example. We're here 24/7, 365. We're not here out of fashion. The news media will disregard what we're doing. We're not on their map. And the reality that organizing is what changes history is almost completely disregarded and negated and ignored by the mass media. One of the great activists we all miss, Tim Carpenter, used to say, the spreadsheets, the Google Docs, they never make it into the history books. But of course, the kind of work that we do that's often tedious and sometimes demoralizing, that's what it's about. That's how history, that's part of how history gets changed. The last thing I'd like to focus on is some of the maybe tactical aspects, but what I think really has to do with ultimately what our strategies entail. Of course, I think PDA's inside-outside strategy, which was somewhat controversial on the left 10 or 15 years ago, I think it's been largely vindicated, working electorally and also outside of electoral arenas, has brought us so many changes. The Occupy movement, the Medicare for All movement that was marginalized before it became center stage. If AOC had run as a Green, she would still be tending bar. Nothing wrong with tending bar, but we're, of course, so much more glad that she's in Congress. And in a nutshell, I believe that the place for, if you will, third parties or Green Party efforts is not anywhere where there's a partisan designation on the ballot. We just have a 30 or 40 year laboratory history, not theoretical, but practical in this country, the way that we don't have a parliamentary system. And I think this lesson, has been learned by many, although not by all. And so the diversion of resources every 4 years at best, and the hazards are there as well in places like Michigan and Ohio and Wisconsin and Pennsylvania. But the diversion of resources into a Green Party race for president is at best squandered and at worst an aid to the right wing. Whereas the Green Party, and I know just near where I live in Fairfax, great Green Party activists who have been able to gain progressive control, coordination of the town government. And of course, tremendous alliances in Richmond and elsewhere where Greens have just been central parts of building those coalitions. So I guess I just want to wrap up by saying that I believe that when it comes to state power at the level in Washington, D.C., in the state capitals, in the legislatures, anywhere where the power is made possible by elections that have partisan designations on the ballot, the only avenue through that is through a political party. And for progressives, the only avenue, the only political party that makes sense is the Democratic Party. And I want to add in terms of the next few months, you know, the arguments are already raging. I don't want to waste any time, and I hope none of us will waste any time trying to convince anybody who doesn't want to in New York or California that they should vote for Joe Biden. It's just a complete waste of time, because it doesn't matter how progressives vote for president in the safe states. But there are about 12 states where it obviously tremendously matters if progressives are going to vote for Biden or not. And at rootsaction.org, we're among the many groups that while we have been tremendously critical of Joe Biden and the forces he represents, and while we will continue to speak directly and truthfully about the dangers from these neoliberal politicians, it's essential to use the only tool available in the swing states to defeat Trump. And that, of course, is to use a vote for Biden in the process. So again, glad to be able to hear everybody this evening, and thanks to PDA for making this possible.
Thank you, Norman. Thank you for all of your work. Are there people who have questions specifically for Norman? You can add them to the chat, or we can begin to open this. I wanted to first acknowledge a few of the people who've joined us. We have Cynthia Papermaster, who is with Code Pink. We have Alfred Tu, who's been elected to the Asian Pacific Islander caucus of the California State Democratic Party. We have Pamela Price is on, and she is now a member and on the board of the Progressive Democrats of America in Oakland. She recently ran for mayor in Oakland and for DA previous to that. I think somebody can add the 12 states into the chat. Are there other questions for Norman? Okay, we have one from Javanka. How do we divorce the Democratic Party? They're like an abusive spouse. It is impossible to have a progressive party, a working people's party. Is that possible?
Well, I think it's possible in a parliamentary system to start a new party and be successful. And there are a lot of examples of that. Unfortunately, here we have the structural realities. And when we look at what's happened, what would have been the case, say, if Ilhan Omar or Rashida Tlaib had decided to start a new party? We wouldn't know their names nationally. They wouldn't have the tremendous impact that they've already had. And I think that continues to answer our questions at the state levels as well. It's almost unheard of to have a third-party member of a state legislature where some of these battles are fought, or statewide examples. I think there was one statewide official, Green, in New Mexico at one point. These are such rarities. There was a member of the state legislature elected from the East Bay maybe 20 years ago, and she quickly changed her party designation to Democrat. So, in theory, we could start a workers' party. I think in practice, We need to make the Democratic Party a workers' party.
Sorry. Okay, I am going to mute all for a second. No, never mind. Did you want to finish that thought, Norman, before we go on?
Oh, no, I think we had a visit from Big Brother. That was Siri responding to me.
There was one question in the chat box from Art Persico, and it is, in the progressive areas, are there specific people that you think that we should vote for, work for, Green Party, Peace and Freedom, any other candidates that you were going to support?
Well, I'll answer that partly in one way. At Roots Action, we did a report called Bad Blues, where we mentioned 15 incumbent members of the House who could be challenged. And if you go to badblues.org, you'll see there are some good challenges going to several of those candidates like Gottheimer in Northern New Jersey. But I think more broadly, I would say first, if you're on the email list of PDA, of Justice Democrats, of Democracy for America, of Roots Action, you're going to be getting constant emails at this point alerting you to, as the calendar moves, some of the best progressives to support, often their primary challenges. And I think it's a great way that digital power has been mobilized and built by a lot of progressive groups so that we around the country can learn, as it's always a changing situation, who has a shot. And we know that Lipinski was beat precisely because of that reason, this awful right-wing Democrat, and we almost had that pulled off against Cuellar in Texas. So it's an ongoing process, and I think it's very important.
I think you're muted, Hemant.
Okay, great. Sorry, that's a party foul. Every time you do that, you're going to have to drink. Just kidding. We're not supporting alcohol usage during Zoom meetings. I think somebody is actually having a fireworks display outside my window, so I apologize if you all can hear that. Thank you so much, Norman, for all of your thoughtfulness, for your wisdom, for your leadership, all of these many years. I really appreciate you. I would like to move forward and introduce our last speaker. Because we took questions in between, we'll have a slightly shorter time for discussion. So if your question did not get asked, you can still put it into the chat box. Our last speaker is Elizabeth Milano, and she is with Sunrise. She has a presentation for us, and so I'm going to see if I can do the share screen and allow that, although I've never done that before, so it may be a little bit tricky. Let's see, just a minute. First, I'm going to put her on, and then we'll see if we can, great. Elizabeth, you are now unmuted. Do you have your presentation, and is it showing up somewhere so I can?
Yeah, it looks like I have share screen ability.
Okay,
so
great.
I think I should just be able to my screen. And can y'all see this? Hopefully, yes. Okay. Just want to say that, first of all, my internet is not great. So I apologize if I cut in and out. Somebody just flag me in the chat if I start breaking up a lot, and I can turn off my video or repeat a point or anything that's needed. But to introduce myself, my name is Elizabeth. I use pronouns. I've been with Sunrise Movement for about a year. And I feel very humble to be in this space with such incredible activists. Jane, especially, I remember seeing you at a Bernie campaign and just feeling really inspired by the staff that Bernie pulled in, as well as the leadership that he provided for this party. So thank you so much for having me and letting me share some of Sunrise Movement and some of our path forward. Some of you may be familiar with Sunrise, some of you may not. So I'm going to start way back at the beginning to get us all on the same page to let you all see what we're doing with this historic time. So I also, sitting on this land, feel very humbled by the fact that this land has been taken care of for thousands and thousands of years. And when I think about sustainable models of humans living with the environment, we have knowledge to draw upon. And so we typically begin our presentations by reminding ourselves and grounding ourselves on the land that we are on. So personally, I'm in San Francisco. I'm on Ohlone land. If anybody else wants to post in the chat where they are, that always helps ground me as well. So the last kind of acknowledgement is the fact that this is a very weird time that we're living in. These are unprecedented times. If you're like me, then you are glued to the news. You're glued to these numbers of unemployment. You're glued to the numbers of death tolls, of autoimmune disorders, and it's scary. And so to think about where we are as a society, the Sunrise Movement is not pushing for just a climate change reform. We are very well versed and very grounded in the fact that this crisis right now is absolutely at the forefront of people's minds and shows people how we respond to crises. So what I mean by that, we can look at by looking at the CARES Act, which I'm sure we're all familiar with. And if we see this $2 trillion that was sent out to various people, we can look at the big corporations, which are getting massive amounts of money. We can look at big cities, which have over 100,000 people in it getting money. These smaller and smaller bubbles for public health, for safety nets, for education and other. And we can look at the people who these bills clearly leave out. Undocumented folks, incarcerated folks, people who are oftentimes ignored and their voices are not heard by the system. All of this is really wrapped up in a model of disaster capitalism, which is a phrase I'm sure many of us are familiar with and have really heard of. But to define it, this is a term coined by Naomi Klein, where she says, I call it orchestrated raids on the public sphere in the wake of catastrophic events, combined with the treatment of disasters as exciting market opportunities, disaster capitalism. AKA, how can the rich profit off of the despair and the death and the agony that average people are facing? And so to give you a brief example of what disaster capitalism is, we can look at something like Hurricane Katrina, which most impacted low-income communities, which most impacted communities of color, and we can look at the responses to it. The federal response to it was to privatize schools. New Orleans now has one of the most privatized school systems in the US. The response to it was also roll back environmental regulations when our oil and gas industry down on the Gulf Coast got devastated in order to stimulate economic growth. If that sounds familiar, it's because the person on the task force heading this particular economic task force was Mike Pence. And if we look at how we are responding to coronavirus right now, we are seeing environmental regulation rollbacks sometimes happening on Earth Day itself. And I'm sure we can think of many other examples, the war on terror, the 2008 bank bailout, and coronavirus. Now, we're getting into what Sunrise Movement is fighting for right now, because we see that this moment that we're in is not only an opportunity to confront income inequality, it's a moment where our economy has stopped and we can actually look to the future and what we need. Now, I'm curious, has the people's bailout been kind of discussed or talked about throughout this evening at all? If somebody kind of wants to drop in the chat how much we've talked about the people's bailout tonight. Oh, I'm seeing somebody shake their head. Okay, great. The people's bailout is something that Sunrise is actively campaigning for because it is facing the COVID crisis, the climate crisis, and income inequality in a way that we've seen government regulation not thinking about the intersectionality of these crises. So there's 5 main tenets of the people's bailout, and y'all can read through the details But number one, health is a top priority for all people. That includes undocumented people. That includes people who did not file a tax return in 2018 or 2019. Economic relief must be provided to the people, not to corporations themselves. Rescue workers and communities, not corporate executives. Make a down payment on a regenerative economy. And this is one that really excites me because the way that we are thinking about rebuilding our economy is fueling the climate crisis. Right now, we're in a moment where we can stop and take a breath and think about the fact that we can use this moment to think about how our economy is structured. And the last tenet is protect our democratic process while protecting each other. And this is something that I've been seeing a lot touched upon. I heard both Norman and Jane touch upon it. I've seen it in the chat. My parents live in Wisconsin, and I begged them not to go vote because I didn't want them to get sick. My dad has all of these hosts of underlying health issues. And the thought about him expressing, Wisconsin is a state where my parents need to vote, as I'm sure you all are aware, with all of the policies going on there, but I just couldn't, it gave me anxiety and kept me up at night. So the people's bailout is something that we are actively working for right now. And I'm gonna post a link in the chat to the people's bailout because this is one of our main tenets of how we are responding to the moment, because the Green New Deal can be encompassed within the people's. Another way that we're responding is by solidarity. Solidarity, not charity. In the last 3 weeks, we have raised over $30,000 for 3 groups, bringing up these frontline communities. So the groups we've raised money for is UndocuFund, Disability Justice Culture Club, and Community Ready Corps. Now, our goal was $20,000 in 5 weeks. So Sunrise mobilized all of our members and all of our communities and asked them, if you're in a stable financial spot, please consider giving to people who are being left behind. And we don't just want to give money, we want to give money to groups that are uplifting those people in sustainable ways. So if any, our fundraiser drive is still going. So if any of you folks can and are in a financial spot to donate, we are trying to get $35,000 because at this point, thank you for sharing that, Dr. Cho. Because it's not enough. It's not enough to give $12,000 or $1,200 if you live in San Francisco. It's not enough to give it if you live in Arkansas. This is not enough money, and it's just an insult when all these large corporations are just getting so much money. Now, we are hoping to use this crisis to rebuild, produce something better, produce something more humane. Oh, sorry about that. Am I sharing, which screen am I sharing now? My notes, right? Okay, or my presentation. We know that disaster capitalism is the model that we are in right now. We know that environmental crises are a question of when, not if. We know that climate crisis is intensifying actively, even though we've seen all these news stories about how pollution levels are falling. There's still large stocks of carbon in the atmosphere. They're just going to keep on continuing these feedback loops. And we've seen how disaster capitalism offers a model of how the crisis will be handled of climate change. So what we are fighting for is a solution that works. We are fighting for a Green New Deal, which I am sure all of us in this group are very familiar with. So I'm really not going to spend a lot of time talking about it, but we know that it is the only thing that's going to provide solutions at the scale of the crisis that we are facing. We know that anything less than total decarbonization is not enough for my generation, for future generations. So we know that we have to fight for something that works and provides jobs and can redo our economy in this clean way that we need. So that's what we're fighting for. Now, to take a step back and talk about who we are, we're the Sunrise Movement. We're a movement of young people looking to stop the climate crisis and create millions of good jobs. Because we know those things do not to be siloed, like people have been claiming for so long. And we have a way to do it. We're going to organize people power to take back political power and win a New Deal. We have some ways to do that. I'm wondering if anyone has heard this number before. This is the number that got me into Sunrise Movement. Erica Chenoweth is a social science researcher who quite honestly didn't believe that nonviolence works. But she compiled the data and found that since the 1900s, every popular movement that has achieved the active, sustained support of 3.5% of the population has succeeded. That's only 11 million Americans. Now, that's attainable. That's doable. And we were planning to mobilize all those people on Earth Day to turn out in the streets and provide one of the largest Earth Day celebrations and shows of our anger that people had ever seen. But of course, as we are right now, we were quarantined. So part of the beauty of being a decentralized organization is that we pivoted. We instead created an online Sunrise School that has been attended by thousands of people. We have over 1,000 people in the Bay Area looking to join movements like Sunrise because people are seeing that this crisis is terrifying with the leadership that we have. People are seeing that even if they don't know the term disaster capitalism, that the way our government responds to crises directly is for large corporations, and it is not people like news as disposable, right? Like undocumented people, like people of color. Now, we also want to mobilize and elect politicians who change that status quo, right? And as many of us know, the Sunrise Movement proudly endorsed Bernie Sanders. And I feel kind of emotional right now because also, as many of us know, Bernie Sanders suspended his campaign, right? But that doesn't mean that we're not fighting for these other Green New Deal champions. And in fact, we have actively shown up for champions who show up for us and gotten them into the seats of power. So we are still responding. We are still absolutely pushing for these candidates. And tonight, actually, there's a meeting of survivors in Sunrise to talk about what we want to do with Joe Biden. Because we know, like Norman so eloquently stated, we have to be realistic in the system we're in, is that we just want a livable future, right? I don't think that's too radical. But we know we have to respond to Joe Biden's eventual nomination. As the way things are going now, he will be the nominee. So tonight, led by survivors of sexual assault, the Sunrise Movement is trying to strategize how that's going to happen, what our response is going to be. And as a survivor myself, I am incredibly grateful that the Sunrise Movement is uplifting the voices of survivors to think about what this response is going to look like. But we also know that we can still be pushing for a people's bailout. We had a phone bank, I believe it was last Friday, where we contacted hundreds and hundreds of emails and voicemails and tweets and whatever other social media things there are. And we told our elected officials that we people's bailout. We know that this moment is historic, but as disaster capitalism shows us, it often does take a large disaster to change the course of our economy. And while we do not want to exploit people, like disaster capitalism often does, we are using this opportunity to mobilize. And we've already seen the thousands and thousands of people who are interested in movements like Sunrise and movements like all of us in this room together, because people are realizing that our old model is not sustainable and that we need to make a change. So with that, that was my quick run through of what Sunrise Movement is doing right now, who we are, what we're fighting for, this model that we're trying to fight against. I'm going to stop sharing my screen so I can actually look at some of the questions that are popping up in the chat, if there was any. Let's see.
I think Alan Minsky has a question for you. And I believe that he is unmuted now.
Okay, great. There goes. Well, I just wanted to say that, you know, PDA, we've partnered with Sunrise on a number of things, and most particularly, we were part of the People for Bernie Coalition. But I also think that the presentation that you just made, so it's not so much a question, is I really do believe, and this is again, of course, something possible if Joe Biden is president, and it's impossible if Donald Trump is president, which is the economic crisis, as you so eloquently framed what you presented as a central component of what we're all thinking about right now, is so severe that obviously the New Deal and the response of an incoming administration from someone who wasn't a great political radical previously, Franklin Delano Roosevelt, transformed American political history. And I think if Joe Biden is coming into office in January, I do think that the movement, Elizabeth, that you're a part of, it is the central mass mobilization environmental movement of the moment. And I do think that Sunrise really could play a phenomenal role in pushing for a Green New Deal as a response to what will be effectively a Great Depression in the United States that we'll be living through economically. And I think even with a moderate Democrat, the amount of achievement and transformation that could occur due to that kind of more than 3.5% of the population hopefully mobilizing behind Sunrise's lead. I think the capacity there, if somebody wants a bright vision for the future, we will need a New Deal, and we need a Green New Deal. And I just wanted to say that because we'll be right there with you.
Thanks, Alan. I appreciate that. And I never thought it was possible for Joe Biden to even say that he supported a Green New Deal. Yet he has, however weak and non-effective his version is. And so it is all the solidarity of groups and people like us really pushing him that has even gotten him to where he is. And we will never, ever stop pushing him further to the left.
Great. He's got a lot of left to cover. Javanka has a question as well. I've unmuted you, Javanka. You can go.
Oh gosh, I don't even remember what it was now. Sorry. That was a great presentation, by the way. It's just so many different things she said. I apologize. I don't remember what it was.
No problem. We can come back to you. We have a question from Robin. And the question is, how can we get Biden to look at the people's bailout?
It's a great question. And I think Sunrise, like many groups throughout the nation, is trying to recalibrate our typical strategies. So our typical strategies are bird dogging, showing up at campaign events, at donor events, and pressuring them on camera to say, do support this. If not, confront them with an aspect of their record and almost embarrass them to show people what they truly believe in and who they truly fight for. Now, we don't anticipate any in-person events for quite a while, so we are recalibrating to more of a digital format. But I imagine it's going to be similar tactics. It's going to be phone banking. It's going to be, digital showing up. It's going to be petitions, maybe. It's going to be webinars. It's going to be teach-ins. If anyone knows the answer to this, I think this is something we've all been kind of wondering, is how do you shift and how do you adjust to this digital age that we're living in? Because we have this dual opportunity where, we have more people than ever who are online desperate for things to do, but a lot less emotional capacity, maybe a lot less financial capacity, less mental capacity. And so it is an opportunity and kind of a hard thing to tap into and expect of people when you're just thinking about your own security. Yeah, thanks for the question. And if people have ideas, I know I'm humbled by the people in this space, and I'm sure that we can also come up with some great things.
I think Sherry Johansson has a question now.
As a Bernie organizer, we have all these people that are still wanting to be organized. So I'd like to know Elizabeth, how do you organize? Do you go by chapters? Do you have a website that we could get people to organize around? I think this is the way we have to go in the future. Yes, Elizabeth?
Yeah, I think she's frozen for a second.
Oh no, did I freeze her?
She did warn us about her.
Well, thank you. You gave me goosebumps, first of all. I'm so glad that we have so much energy and so much momentum. Sorry about that. Am I back?
Yes, you sort of.
Am I back? I'm sort of back. I'll turn my video off. Maybe that will help. Can you guys hear me now?
Yes. Yes, I can
Okay,
hear you.
good. Thank you, Sherry. Well, as I was trying to say, your question gave goosebumps because there is just so much energy and momentum to be tapped into right now. Sunrise specifically, we are mainly a youth-led movement. We're typically ages 8 to 35, but we do have a really large contingency of our 35 to support us in a lot of different ways. So we try to maintain a youth-led space so that youth voices are elevated. We found that in a lot of environmental movements, our voices are not heard, even though we're the ones facing the climate crisis. We absolutely welcome and learn from all of our movement elders. We are primarily youth-led.
I'm
Over 35.
I'm actually thinking about the young people that I worked with that came out to canvas for us. And if I could, I'm in Alameda, and if we could, have a chapter, do you do it that way in a location like Alameda?
Yeah, absolutely. We have a large Bay Area chapter, and then we have a lot of kind of small hubs that have popped up. I'm not sure if we have an Alameda hub, but our website does have this big map that shows all the different hubs in the country and how to contact them.
Okay.
But sunrisemovement.org, sunrisemovement.org is a good place to go. I'm also happy to drop my email, and you guys can email me. I'm happy to make any personal connections that I know. But yes, please, any young people you know that are scared and maybe anxious or depressed, I know that was me before I joined Sunrise. They have a welcome space in Sunrise Movement. And I just dropped mail in the chat.
Wonderful. I think we're going to give the last question to Pamela Price. Pamela, I've unmuted you so you can ask your own question.
Oh, okay. Thank you. Hi, everybody. I'm glad to be here and I appreciate having. Thank you. My question really is, as we look at where we are now, and granted it's different now, but history repeats itself. And so my question really is, where can we look to find an analysis, a study, something published by a progressive historian or more than one about how the progressive movement organized after the Great Depression? Because clearly we're about to go through the Great Depression. And so, I mean, obviously we're in a digital time, so it's very different, but that's a question. We don't have to reinvent the wheel. If somebody, we know people went through this already. So where do we find that information?
That is such a good question. And this is one that I'm going to open to everyone to put their resources in the chat. Because I'm sure people have read some just incredible literature that they can share. The book that comes to mind for me is a book that really inspired me, which is This is a Revolution, where the authors kind of succinctly lay out these studies. So it would be right after the Great Depression, all the way through Arab Spring into Occupy, that really just lays out the case for nonviolent revolutions and how effective they are. And that book, reading it, it talks about their failures, it talks about their successes, it kind of gives a blueprint for what works and what doesn't work, and it cites a lot of great lines on this in 2 different camps of organizing within.
We are losing you. So can you put the title of that book in the chat? Thank you.
That's my personal recommendation, but once again, it's a lot.
What about Alan or Norman?
Yeah, I'm sure Alan,
Type the book into the chat, and then
I'm sure he knows the answer to that question, Pamela.
and then Shirley is going to make.
But I think he's taking a coffee break.
Okay.
So,
there he is. No, he's waving.
oh yeah, Alan, answer that question.
Alan is muted, and I'm not sure that he heard the question.
I heard the question. I was, can you hear me now?
Yes.
I was muted in the way Hemming where I couldn't unmute myself. So I apologize for that. But, well, okay, I mean, the New Deal, Roosevelt's New Deal, you know, nothing like that had really existed previously. I think a lot of people think that the New Deal was the practice of progressive Keynesian economics. Keynesian economics, Keynes actually wrote his general theory of employment after Roosevelt started New Deal, though his ideas were in formation, really with the beginning of the Great Depression. So they were floating around in some economic circles, but it was a pretty bold maneuver what they did historically to bring about that level of federal expenditure into the American economy. And of course, the only examples that really were available for people were war expenditures. And looking at what war expense, a horrible example, I know, what war expenditures do to the economy. And of course, we saw later, a decade later, that the American economy really started booming with even greater federal expenditures due to war spending. But that at least provided a theory for how you can boost up an economy in something that had never been tried outside of the Civil War in the United States, which is to have massive federal expenditure. Just to give an example, because this is what's happening right now with the generation of deficits, with all of what's going on with the passage of these relief bills. You'll notice all of a sudden the discussion about deficits and pay-go has just been thrown out because we're in such a serious crisis. And that had never happened before. Before the New Deal, the percent of federal expenditure that made up the national economy was in single digits, way down around 3%. It's never been below, I want to say, 30% since. Maybe it was below before they brought in Medicare and Medicaid. But you know, in the period after World War II, through the Cold War, and then ever since there's been the Johnson welfare state was built up, federal expenditures have never been below, I don't think below 30%, but maybe it got down to 25%. But it's a huge chunk of the economy that allows us to balance out all the ups and downs of the private market. So we just need to amp it up again, and we will have to amp it up again. And a New Deal now has to be a Green New Deal. And I think that's the winning way forward right now, and something we should really press for from January and the build up to January if Joe Biden's the president-elect. Hope that wasn't too long-winded.
Oh.
No, that was great.
Okay, we have 7 minutes for big thank yous to everyone and announcements. So I'm going to kick it off with a few. And then if anybody else has announcements to add as they hear the items that I say. Tomorrow, May 1st, International Workers' Day. Normally it would be a phenomenal parade. In 2015, I was in Cuba with Code Pink, millions of people. I'll send you all a photo with the chat, just so you can celebrate by yourself. But there is a car caravan in Oakland about a rent strike tomorrow. It's in Facebook. If you want details, let me know. In San Francisco, there's going to be Dean Preston hosting a happy hour for workers with music and poetry, you know, real fun stuff. And of course, I'd just like to say, you know, don't wait till the fall to start doing things. We have incredible candidates right now. For instance, in San Francisco, Jackie Fielder is running against Scott Wiener. Make calls for her, please. And Shahid Buttar is now having his own dialer. So just like you did with Bernie, you can make calls that way. We're an Our Revolution affiliate. And of course, they're making calls in states like Oregon and, you know, lots of states that still have elections coming up, even if we're not hopeful that Bernie will get a zillion delegates. They have very progressive candidates that we can call for, and they use a dialer system also. So, hey, I just think this has been a wonderful evening because of all the great knowledge and your thoughtfulness. And we have recorded this, so hopefully I can download it and send you all the link if you want to share it with friends. And does anybody else have announcements that they would like to share?
Hi, Shirley, it's Rusko.
Go ahead.
Thank you. Yes, so Berkeley Councilwoman Cheryl Dambulla is hosting a Caring for Our Labor Community tomorrow, May Day at 12:30. I'll send the link for the call-in information. Let's join our union brothers and sisters on May Day to celebrate our labor community, recognize the work of our nurses, frontline workers and healthcare workers and more. And here, Javanka Beckles, Andrea Malarkey, Lucy Riley, and representatives from NUHW and other unions. So hope to see you there.
Thank you, Roscoe. Any
Uh,
other?
Yeah, this is Pamela Price. The ILWU is also having a car caravan starting at 11 o'clock at the SSA terminal. Obviously celebrating May Day and workers and advocating for the port and the safety of the port workers.
Wonderful, thank you.
This is Winnie. Tomorrow we're having a town hall for John Avalos, who's running in San Francisco for District 11. The town hall's focus is on essential workers in D11 and what's going on with them and how we can support them. He plans on having a town hall hopefully every week for at least the next month on Friday.
Thank you, Winnie.
It's posted on Facebook.
Okay, I think that's gonna be the wrap up. I wanted to, again, thank you and acknowledge every single person in this forum for the tremendous work that you do every day, every week. Bernie knows how much we fought for him, and also that all of these issues are going to win, and that eventually when we organize, we win. We are going to take our state, our city, and our nation back. So thank you everyone who attended, and I hope to see you in the Zoom room very soon.
Oh, yes, okay. Two more things. Number one, there was a question for Norman about what can we do for the platform committee, assuming we do get that magic 25%.
Well, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, great. Well, you know, that's really in flux, and this deal today apparently could get us over 25%, but it underscores the importance not only of the quantity, but the quality of the delegates. And so it's all up to us to organize, I think, effectively.
Thank you. And next month, our Zoom meeting, I hope, will be combined again. And we're going to be talking about flipping the Senate. And we're going to throw some of those candidates into the mix. PDA has already endorsed Andrew Romanoff in Colorado. And let's see, Betsy Sweet in Maine to, of course, unseat Susan Collins. And we'll have a few more to add to the mix next month. So I hope you all can join us again.
Shirley.
Yeah.
Popular Resistance is promoting a one-day national and international strike tomorrow, and they're trying to do it each first of the month starting tomorrow. And you can look that up on popularresistance.org.
Okay, we'll put that in the chat as well.
That's wonderful. Thank you, Roger.
My pleasure.
Hey, can you hear me, Hemming?
Yes.
Yeah, well, quickly, Jane Kim was making incredibly great recommendations of candidates, I think all in California. I mean, Georgette Gomez was a federal candidate. I forget if there was any, oh yes, and Aubrey Denny. Both will probably get PDA endorsements for the general election. And then the other 5 were non-federal candidates. So that would be, of course, PDA-CA would be determining those. I did want to just reiterate the statistics I just cited. I find them incredulous when I cite them. And I even went and looked back because they sound so ridiculous. Nobody in all of the, and maybe Norman can just reflect or about this too, because of all of his fantastic work as a media critic. You never hear in American social, political discourse, dialogue, whatever, the whole national dialogue, that government expenditure is above 30, consistently above 30% of GDP in the United States. And I just looked it up in 2020, the estimate, and by the way, this is federal, state, and local, but a lot of that is like Medicaid that's queued by the federal government. It's 36.6%. So much for free market capitalism. This is a, basically hybrid economy, even after 40 years of neoliberalism. It's just that the expenditures, like military expenditures, that's a huge chunk of that, of course, they do not serve the best interests of working families and the average people. So thanks. I just wanted to clarify because that's such a unheard but true and outrageous statistic.
Great. Thank you so much, Alan. This video will be available. We're going to email it out, and we're going to try to figure out a way of saving the chat and letting everybody have all those great resources Jane Kim gave us. Thank you to all of our speakers. Alan, Jane, Norman, I'm forgetting 2 people, Elizabeth. And thank you everybody who attended. Thank you, because Javanka went first. She was the last in my mind. And please stay in touch, let us know what you're up to, and we will be in touch next time. Thank you, everyone. Have a wonderful night. Be safe, be healthy, and be well.
Thank you, Hemming.
Great job.
Thanks for coming.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Hemi. Thank you, Shirley.
Yep.
Pamela.
Love you all.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Down for a sec.
What a great group.
I know. We are very lucky.
Very good.
Coming.
Thank you, Jane. Thank you so much. Shirley.
Yes.
Just gonna let you know, and a few people are still getting off, but I can't find the tab, the 3 dots that normally show up, and
up there, yeah.
They save. When you see the 3 dots in the chat, does it say that you can save the chat?
Well, let's see. Right now, there are no 3 dots, but let me go down to the bottom where it says chat and see what it says there. No, that's not it. We'll figure this out. I know we will.
I have to say, half of the time I have been able to save the chat, and the other half I have not, and I do not know what the difference is.
Yes. Well, it has to do quite possibly with which type of Zoom contract you have. So let's see. So there's the copy and paste function. Let's see. Let me keep going all the way up, and then I'm going to go to a Word document. Oh, this is a long chat. Wow.
Hey, Shirley.
Yeah.
I've had the same problem. Sometimes you can cut and paste them,
And sometimes you can't.
Right. And this one seems to be immune to cutting and pasting, but I'm not sure.
What do you mean immune?
Well, I mean, it just can't, it doesn't allow you to, you know, on my Mac, hit the edit function and copy it.
Oh, well, you have a Mac. That's your
Yeah.
problem.
No.
Wow,
Hold on.
I
Let
haven't
me
heard that
see.
kind of Mac prejudice in quite some time.
Yeah, the settings on these Zoom calls are different. So sometimes you can copy them and sometimes you can't.
No, it has to do with how much you pay for your Zoom program. All right, I'm going to try a new Word document. And let's see what happens when I paste. Oh, nope, there's everybody who was on. Oh, well, nope, that's not it. So that didn't work. Let's see. Well, I suppose manually.
Just transcribe it, go through and just type it into a
Yeah,
document.
that's what I'm thinking.
That would take a lot of work.
Well, you know, we have this chat room for 24 hours.
If somebody wanted to help you, they would just
24 hours.
read it. One person could read it to the person typing, it would go faster.
Oh,
that way.
yeah, that would be great. Would you like to do that, Art?
I'll help you, sure.
Okay, I'm at the Word document. Start at the
24
top.
hours, you said.
Now,
And you know what? Don't tell me everything that everybody said, like, hi, I'm from San Francisco.
right, just the major points, the questions and the comments.
Yeah.
I
Okay.
think resources are the most important.
Hemming could, if you want to select what read, or I'll do it, you know.
I have to run because my
Okay.
mother's waiting dinner on me
I'll
for
do it.
hours. So I'm going to be leaving the meeting, but Shirley is now the host.
Okay.
So Art and I are here. Anybody else who wants to sing to us or anything like that, we'd more than welcome it. Yeah, play Cuban music. That would be fun. Okay, Art.
So anything that's like a, you know, high fives and things like that.
Yeah.
Thanks, Hemming. We don't need the comments that are just complimentary, right?
Right.
Okay, the questions that got asked, like, you want those?
Sure.
The first one's from me, how convenient. Please ask Norman for his list of candidates that he'd encourage progressives to support this November.
Okay, let me get to.
He answered a form of that question.
Hold on. Wait, I lost my document. Okay, here we go.
Please
Norman.
ask,
Wait,
please ask Norman for his list of candidates he'd encourage progressives to support this November.
list of progressive candidates to support.
Yeah, this November. It was longer, but that's the essence of it, okay?
I like the short version.
Okay, we'll do some editing.
Next.
I'm scrolling.
Okay.
Okay, here's another question. This is, you want from who it's from Rebecca S.
Okay.
To everyone, what can we do about Cuomo canceling Bernie in the New York primary? Question.
What can
we do
about
Cuomo canceling
Cuomo
Bernie?
canceling? I don't know if it was him or whatever, but
And there's more to that. What about those delegates?
yeah, well, that was already addressed.
And by the way, does anyone know who helped CADAM select the California Bernie delegates by congressional district? Seems like selected some folks who are questionable.
So that would be for Jane. Well, she discussed that standard.
Yeah,
with
she did.
how to cut it down.
Right.
So we'll just make a comment. Difficult to wean down delegates in CA due to live caucus. Okay?
Okay. A question from Blair B to everyone. Was Bernie's health issues a factor? Should it be openly talked about? Could it avoid a lot of empty rhetoric?
I'll just say, how's Bernie's health?
Did it affect his decision?
He looks healthy as a horse to me. I'm sorry.
Yeah. Then Robin had a question. So why did Bernie drop? Was it because he saw Biden's state win numbers higher than his, Or was it that he wanted to beat Trump and decided to try to bring everyone together?
I think
But-
Jane answered that
Yeah,
when she said it in the chat, and you'll see it later on.
Winnie Porter answered, she said, I believe it had to do with the dangers of voting in person.
Yeah,
He
yes,
wouldn't put
exactly.
anyone's life in danger.
Uh-huh. Yeah. And particularly because our voters oftentimes are have more health challenges than those rich old other people.
Next question is from Suzanne. Suzanne's iPad. Must be Suzanne Cowan, right?
Yep.
Looking forward, for those of us who don't want to campaign for Biden, what are some of the most important campaigns we can engage in now? That got a lot of answers. We'll capture those in this chat, hopefully.
Yeah.
Then, you ready for the next one?
Yep.
This is another one of mine. Would you ask Alan Minsky if Biden is certain to be the Democratic Party nominee, or is there a chance he could fail to get enough delegates, be denied the nomination on the first ballot, and so have a chance for a second ballot, dark horse candidate? Is that a stupid question?
No, it's not stupid. I mean, we just have no idea.
Yeah, I'm intrigued by it. That's my fantasy.
Well, yeah, we all love that fantasy art. Keep it going.
Okay.
Next.
Scrolling. How do you get those who don't even want to vote for Biden and won't for number 45 either?
Oh, yeah. Who asked that? Cheryl.
Oh, that's Cheryl Dambulla, yeah.
Uh-huh. How do you get folks to vote with two not great? That's a nice euphemism, not great. How about terrible? One terrible and one a disaster. Okay, how do you get folks to vote with two not great candidates? And I think Norman answered that, didn't he?
I think he did. Yeah, he talked a lot about, he did.
It depends what state you're in.
Yeah.
I think.
And also, yeah.
Well, was it 10 or 12?
12. He mentioned there were 12 states where it was important, and to avert Trump by voting for Biden. That's hard for Norman to say because he did say he's really opposed to Biden.
Well, you remember that big long sheet. That
I still have it. Yeah.
Yeah, I have a whole pile of them.
Yeah, I do too. I feel guilty about that.
I guess it's time to put them in recycling. Hey.
Maybe. Yeah. Okay. And then the next one is another one from me. For Alan Minsky. Because of your relationship to the Pacifica Network, you think a national weekly talk show on Pacifica would be a good tool for progressives to talk to each other and strategize in the run up to the Democratic Convention and beyond.
Does he already have that?
I don't think so. Like I envision, the host of Democracy Now, or Norman being the host of that, something like that. Can you imagine a national talk show for progressives on Pacifica? They have like 5 or 6 stations around the country.
Please make a national weekly
talk show for progressives. And Minsky, is he still associated with Pacifica, or is he formerly?
Yes, yes.
Oh, so he
has a blog. He has a blog. You can follow his blog. So
this is a really good opportunity to get that idea into Pacifica through him. Next.
Good questions, Art.
Thank you. I'm looking, scrolling. Somebody put a website link. Check
Yes.
out, oh yeah, HTTPS, this is the peoplesparty.org. Probably if you put in, just search for People's Party, you'll get the URL. It's the usual https://peoplesparty.org/.
Got it?
Okay. Scrolling. Oh yeah, here's another one for me. A question from Norman or Alan. I heard that Justin Amash may be a candidate for president as an independent.
Yes, he's doing it. No, as a libertarian.
Okay.
He's doing an exploratory thing right now.
Could that change the dynamics of the race, presumably between Biden and Trump?
No.
It won't have equal impact. Would it have equal impact on both camps?
I think most people are going to say, "Who's Justin Amash?"
Yeah. Okay.
It's not like he's Ralph Nader, you know.
Rebecca had a question. How were the California Bernie delegates selected?
Yeah, Jane answered that.
Okay. Another one, a question, why did Bernie quit? Was it the numbers of the state wins?
Let me just
That was
write
Robin.
how delegates selected. Jane said balancing urban and rural areas for race, sex, oh, sorry, not sex, gender, LGBTQ, etc. Okay. What was the next question?
It's from Alfred, TWU.
Alfred Twu, yes.
We've seen how it's important to get involved in the party. Next, how do we change the media, especially how do we challenge the power of TV news?
We don't listen to them and we don't buy their advertisers.
We get Pacifica stronger and get them to start a TV station.
Mm.
Well, you know, video conferencing has the power to, what's the limit on the number of people you could have on a Zoom?
We have a 100-person account.
Is there 1,000-person Zoom?
Yes, but it's very expensive.
So it's approaching the cost of TV news?
I don't know.
Okay.
Next.
Okay, there was John Trenkle had a critique of how things were
Yeah, I
going.
read his critique.
Okay.
John, there was only one John on, right?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay.
I thought tonight's meeting was about how to carry forward Bernie's politics.
Yeah, I read that. Okay.
Okay.
So
No
he
need to.
wanted more action steps
Yeah.
for the future.
Yeah. And
And we
Hemming,
gave him some, but he asked that, he made that comment early on before we got
Yeah.
into so.
and Hemming answered, it's about both. We acknowledge the work and looking forward into strategies of for carrying the issues and winning.
That's all right. We can skip that.
Okay.
Next.
Okay. Hemming, in response to someone, said, yes, Shahid Buttar and Jackie Fielder.
Oh, when I said we should do phone banking or something about working for local candidates.
Mm-hmm. And Rebecca's responding to Jane saying something, we need to address voter suppression.
Oh yeah, we didn't talk about that, did we?
No.
Who made that comment?
That was Rebecca S. What's the last name on S? Rebecca S.
She goes by Rebecca Sanders. She's actually Rebecca Hernandez.
Okay. Thought it might be Solnit, but didn't think
No.
so.
Rebecca, need to address voter suppression.
And then Kate Hallinan said in response maybe to Jane, yes, we must run progressives for SOS nationwide.
Ah, yes.
What's SOS?
Secretary of State.
Okay. And Kate added there are 37 SOS races in 2022.
In 2020 or 2022?
She said 2022.
Hmm.
Maybe she meant 2020. I don't know. You could
I'll
ask her.
put down 37 races and then I'll check it before I
Yeah.
send it out.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh, she said 2022.
She did.
So
Oh,
it's a big number for 2022 and the 6 or 7 for 2020.
okay. Thank you, Robin.
I finally figured out I was muted. Hi.
Yeah, and one of them is the young guy in Montana. Young down.
That was her favorite one, and then also she likes Oregon. And Jane Kim put in some recommendations.
Yeah, Art's reading me the chat so I can manually type it.
Okay, the next one is someone said they got an email from the Bernie Delegates team last night, and their last sentence I didn't get. Quote, after consulting with the CDP, our campaign has agreed to reduce the list of delegate candidates to no more than minimum required, 3 per delegate, seat 1 in the California presidential primary, in order to comply with social distancing recommendations. It doesn't seem likely we'll meet in person, so why reduce the delegates?
No, that's what they're saying. That's what the California Democratic Party wanted to do.
And that was addressed in the
Yeah.
by Norman, right?
No, that was by Jane.
Okay.
It's up in the air now.
Yeah, it's not decided.
Yeah. I think we got a plan for both directions.
Mm-hmm. So that was in CD 13. We had 95 people running.
Do you need to have the person who asked that question? It was Stelhemp BP. Stelhem.
How do you spell that?
STEL
Uh-huh.
HEMBP.
Yeah, we'll just have to see if we can persuade them. That might be a good thing to challenge the CDP on.
Yeah. So Hemming at 7:55 p.m. said free college in all capital letters, maybe in response to something one of the speakers was saying. That Jane Kim, maybe?
Probably. Yeah, Jane was saying, that even though she didn't win her races, she made a lot of impact on various policy issues, such as Free City. Okay, next.
And then another one, comment by Hemming, right pretty soon after that. Universal childcare, yes, thank you, Jane.
Yeah, that was she didn't win mayor, but she got that.
Right.
It was quite dramatic.
Now there's a question from somebody else. Madcap 42.
Yes, uh-huh.
Is there a plan in place to prioritize the Green New Deal? Climate is a big issue this cycle, and we have a good case that this epidemic was due in part to climate change.
Yes. What's the plan to prioritize climate change? And we
the Green New Deal.
The sunrise moment.
Yeah, the Green New Deal was the emphasis.
So that was before.
Actually, ironically, the virus is much more virulent in cold weather, so warm weather actually helps us.
Right. Okay, the next one. I'm not sure I understand it. Blair B says, I have rationalized possible long-term issues if Bernie was to have a 2-term presidency.
Well, I think we need to skip that because
Yeah.
Bernie's not going to have a 2-term presidency.
Yeah. And why the moderate consolidation. That was discussed, I think.
Who asked that?
That was also Blair B. Blair B had a bunch of little
Yeah,
questions or
okay, I'll
comments.
put that one in. Why the moderate?
Consolidation.
It was to support Biden,
Yeah,
clearly, against Sanders.
right.
Because, you know, he's going to be a puppet just like Bush was a puppet.
Then Frances Mendenhall.
Oh, yeah, my friend from Nebraska.
Oh, she says Bernie's climate plank is the only detailed plan for the Green New Deal, and promoting it is super important.
Yep.
So Bernie's plank, climate plank, is the only detailed plan for the Green New Deal.
That's right. He wrote the damn bill.
Sounds familiar.
So that's important. It's a goal that we want people to know about to work for.
Yeah.
I mean, we actually need the positive things to work for at this point, and that's
Right.
an example.
Yeah, well, you know, Norman had the great point. You got to work against the right, and then you got to work for your progressive values, and
Yeah.
that's the way it is.
And then Robin was suggesting, can they all caucus with social distancing? But I think
No.
it's going to be better for us if they do it without meeting in person.
Well, and the other thing you have to say is, you know, when there are only 3 slots, you
Yeah.
want 95 people to, you know, come in the room and give their 1-minute speech. I mean, really.
Yeah.
I don't know if you've ever been to a delegate caucus before. But,
No.
oh,
Nope.
gets you to sleep. Okay, next.
Bobby Lopez, I guess is a comment. This is why I supported Kimberly Ellis over Rusty Kicks.
Yeah, well, we all did.
As a delegate. Okay, spilt milk. Any other delegates want to craft a letter to the party to ensure investment into tech? Question mark.
Okay. Letter
What
for
does that mean, investment for tech to help us?
use
I
tech.
guess so that we have a better tech version of the caucus.
Oh, okay, for the delegate selection.
That's what I assume Bobby is talking about.
Yeah, okay. Oh, wasn't it Buttigieg who had a company or something?
Let's see. From Jovanka. Why do you all think that moderates are able to consolidate their votes, but progressives do not?
Okay, and Robin had a very good answer. We are purists.
And she also went on to say, for example, in AD 15 of the 12 running, all but one endorsed me, yet a moderate won, question mark.
What can we say? Would you say that? Would you say all of Javanka's sentence again? Because I missed part of it.
Sure. It's a long, it's fairly long. Why do you all think that moderates are able to consolidate their votes, but progressives do not?
Okay.
Question mark.
My answer might be because everybody wants everybody to work on their issues, and we just don't have the time for it. So I think we need to get really smart about liaisoning.
Well, I think also, you know, what she was saying about the candidates as opposed to issues, you know, there's all these candidates running. And so we all go and say, okay, I want this one, and I want this one, and I want this one, you know, and you spread it all out. And then, you know, the ones who would be best. That's what a slate is about. The slate is supposed to have the best people, but someone crafted a slate, you know, that was a mixed bag. So I'm sorry, the person who did that. Shame on you.
And also, it's hard for candidates to give up all of a sudden their candidacy and say, I'll sacrifice and I'll throw in the hat or I'll throw in the towel and support this other person I'll sacrifice to make it possible for them to have a better chance of winning.
Yeah.
Okay. Let's see. Are we getting down to the bottom?
I'm at 8:02, and so we only have an hour left of chat to go through. But there's a lot of, wheat and chaff here, so we'll get to the good stuff because there's a lot of congratulating each other here.
Yeah, we can skip that.
Yeah. Okay, so Jane Kim had an answer to Winnie. Yes, she said, yes, Winnie is correct. The senator was very concerned about asking his supporters to come out and vote in person.
Yeah,
But
we talked about that before.
It was really hard. You don't need that one?
No, we covered that before.
Okay, moving down the chat. Jane Kim said, we had the most Bernie volunteers in the nation in the Bay Area.
And many of those volunteers actually went on Bernie journeys as well.
Jane Kim had another, she talked to Jovanka. This is just my perspective. I believe that the media did a very effective job of scaring a good number of voters regarding Bernie Sanders, which is why our ground game was so important. We literally had to show up at people's doors and call them in order to present the human face of the campaign and explain the practical nature of Senator Sanders' campaign. She did say that out loud too.
It's true. You know, when you show up at somebody's door and you speak the truth, you know.
You look people in the eye and
yeah, and they love you and they understand.
There's credibility.
In California to flip all the districts here in 2000 last election.
You know, the media just, you know, brainwashes them.
Yeah.
Okay, next.
Okay, Robin said on top of what the prior comment, also a public health issue, questioning whether it's going to be a good idea to vaccinate everyone. Many people react very badly to vaccines, so a major health safety issue is coming up.
So I'm raising it as a public health issue.
That's a question for Dr. Bill.
Right.
So when he has his next Medicare for All thing on Sunday, ask him that question.
Yeah.
So do you think that will become part of our program though, going forward? Because I think it's a very important question for public health.
Ask Dr. Bill.
And when?
Sunday, 1 o'clock.
He has a weekly,
Sunday?
it's a weekly event.
He does it actually twice a week. It's on the COVID thing. And he has all sorts of great speakers. And of course, he was an emergency room doctor.
So we could ask the question.
Yeah.
Ask
It's
him.
open. It's open.
Okay.
It's a PDA event, right?
Yeah.
Okay,
Next.
Wendy Porter said, in my hood, in the Excelsior, we activated quite a few progressives to get involved. I appreciate the opportunity to find and get to know my progressive neighbors. The virus, however, has left me grappling how to bring us all back together.
Okay, so Winnie said, great to get my hood organized.
My answer is a lot of online experience. We have so many volunteers here. We have so much political energy. I think online would be a great answer right now. We
And
just
she
have to
won-
get them all online to
and she-
be with each other.
Yeah.
Like this tonight.
She wanted to get progressives involved in her neighborhood, and she's
So, you know, like organizing tonight for this event. I mean, I reached out to steering committee people and I asked them to personally call people. And beyond that, you know, I had a lot of people who came to events that I hosted. I invited them. They weren't on the PDA list, you know, and just kept, you know, throwing everyone in the hopper. And that's what you have to do in terms of organizing. You have to keep.
Yeah, I would agree. If she's going to bring a
going.
neighborhood together, call, like we were calling. So that's very useful as part of this.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, next, Art.
yeah, looking at Jane Kim to everyone. Alfred, I do not know if your question on the power of TV news is directed to me, but I do not have the answer. I just know that in California, ground game and door knocking effectively.
Yeah, I already typed that.
Okay. And Jane Kim goes on, we simply do not do as well in states. We did not have the robust several month long ground game. We did not win any primary after March 3rd. with one exception, North Dakota.
Yeah, no problem.
Okay.
When
Jane,
we're on the ground, we win.
Next, Jane, comment. I do hope the CDP will host virtual caucuses. I do know that it is the campaign's preference is that everyone gets to run.
Yeah.
Dana Higgins wanted to know what deal was struck this morning.
Well, she's got to read the paper.
Okay.
Next.
And Hemming answered. Bernie will be receiving the number of delegates in lieu of his name on the ballot in New York.
Mm-hmm.
And then Jane Kim said, again, I believe there are only 6 or 7 Secretary of State races in 2020.
Yeah, got
like
it.
Robin said.
Got it.
You don't need that one?
Nope, I put it up there.
Bryce Bennett, Montana, and then there's a link. So she's encouraging people to know that link, Bryce Bennett from Montana.com.
How do you spell Bryce?
BRYCE.
How do you spell Bennett?
BENNET.
Okay.
And the maximum contribution in this race is $680.
BryceBennett.com?
Yes. Well, it says Bryce Bennett for Montana.com.
Oh, I'm sorry. For Montana. Okay. Okay.
Okay.
Next.
I'm looking.
Oh, maybe we're near the end.
Well, we're about 8:15. Well, Robin asked, is the Montana Secretary of State race the only relevant one for us to be supporting, or are there any more? And Jane answered, Washington, Missouri, West Virginia has Republican incumbents running. Vermont is also up, but James Kondos is a Democrat, and I hear quite good.
Okay.
Oregon has an open SOS.
Start again.
Start again? You want
Yes,
the states?
Jane said other Secretary of State was Washington.
Missouri.
Washington.
Yeah. Missouri, West Virginia.
Missouri, West Virginia.
Has Republican incumbents running.
Okay.
Vermont is also up, but James Kondos is a Democrat, and I hear quite good.
Okay. So
Oregon has an open Secretary of State seat.
So Oregon sounds of interest to us, I guess.
Yeah.
She says it'll be a Dem versus Republican.
Okay.
And then Jane Kim again, we are quite lucky to win a Democrat SOS in 2018 in Michigan. This will be huge for Democrats this year.
Okay. Well, that's fine. We
then-
don't have to type that in the chat.
Jane has a link for Jocelyn Benson.
Okay. How do you spell that?
Well, it's a Wikipedia URL. It's
Well, just
Wikipedia
tell me
for
spell me
Jocelyn.
the name. Spell me-
Jocelyn Benson is JOCELYN,
Uh-huh.
and then BENSON.
And who is Jocelyn Benson?
I'm not really sure. It came right after the SOS.
Oh, so maybe she's the Oregon one running for Oregon.
That could be because it came up after Michigan, but I'm not sure.
Okay.
Okay.
Next.
Okay. Looking. Zoe Kelman said, I watched Bernie's town hall today and felt betrayed every time Warren spoke. Is there any VP that we should promote?
VP we should promote to Biden, she means, or whoever.
Yeah.
Or whoever.
For that dark horse candidate that strong, progressive dark horse candidate that will get the nomination instead of Biden.
Yeah.
A VP for
Art
that position.
Persico. Let's
Yeah,
have
oh my
Art
God.
run for president.
Art, are you going to run?
If nominated, I will not accept. If elected, I will not serve. Okay. Then Jane Kim says Bryce also led legislation countering dark money in Montana as a state legislator. I hope we can support him to win.
Okay.
Then Javanka asks, how do we divorce the Democratic Party? They are an abusive spouse. Is impossible to have a progressive party / working people's party?
And Norman answered, no. Because we don't have parliament.
That's what my wife wants.
When I was in Italy, it was 15 parties. It took 2 hours to explain it all to me.
Yeah,
I mean, I wish we did.
Italy has had parliamentary governments fall one after the other like dominoes. Look at what's happening.
It hasn't been easy there either.
Look what happens in Israel.
It's not easy. I mean, you can't say that answer is easy either.
It's more responsive than ours.
It is more responsive.
Yeah. Okay.
I need my glass of wine and dinner, and my dog needs a walk.
Okay, so we're going to sprint to the finish line here.
Yes, yes.
Okay. I'm looking for the next one. Oh, still looking. Okay, from Blair says, how to address Biden foreign policy issues as well? Question mark.
What foreign policy issues?
That's the question.
That's a good one because, yeah, PDA, because of Tom, we care about that.
Let's do it.
Code Pink, come on, let's lift those sanctions.
Yeah. Okay, Jane Kim says Oregon SOS primary scheduled for May 19th.
Yes, very soon. I was making calls with Our Revolution.
Great. And then there will be a D versus R race in November. So this is another good race to get involved in.
Which race is that, May 19th?
Oregon SOS.
Oregon, okay.
May 19th.
Okay.
So when you go to volunteer, look for that one.
Okay.
And David Hartsoe has a question for Norman.
Yes.
How can
we asked it at the very end. Go ahead.
How can PDA people make sure we win on the platform committee? For example, Medicare for All and Green New Deal? Question mark.
Yeah, we have to get that 25%, and we're close, Norman said. It will be seen. Next.
Blair B asks, can there be a good focus on domestic policy? Question mark.
Where? How?
That came right after the on the platform committee comment from David.
Okay.
Question from Hartsoe. So it's a platform.
Blair wants domestic issues addressed.
Yeah, a platform, a good progressive domestic policy platform.
Well, that's a lot of issues.
Yes. Racial justice, social justice, blah, 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 blah.
Yeah, it's a big basket.
Yeah, for sure.
Next.
Okay, I'm looking.
I type fast, don't I?
Yeah. And then here's another one from Jane Kim. Shemia Fagan, Mark Haas, and Jamie McLeod Skinner are running candidates in the Democratic primary scheduled for May 19th in Oregon. Jamie is a Working Families Party candidate. So 2 good states to focus on, Oregon and Montana. There are also good races in Central Valley, LA, and San Diego.
Yeah. So who else did she like in Oregon? Could you spell their name for me?
Yeah. Shemia Fagan.
S-H-A.
S-H-E.
Oh, S-H-E.
M-I-A.
M-I-A.
Last name Fagan, F-A-G-A-N.
Okay.
Mark Haas, H-A-S-S.
Uh-huh.
And Jamie McLeod, that's M-C capital L-E-O-D dash Skinner.
Did she say they're running or is she recommending them?
Are
No,
running
they're running. They're running.
candidates in the Democratic primary scheduled for May 19th in Oregon. Jamie is a Working Families Party, WFP candidate.
Okay.
So two good states to focus on are Oregon and Montana. And there are good races in Central Valley, LA, and San Diego.
Yeah, she mentioned the Central Valley person later. I think she mentioned her name. If you find that, I'll stick that in there.
Okay.
Too.
The next one from Jane Kim is Holly Mitchell for LA Board of Supervisors.
Oh yeah, that's okay. Jane. Holly Mitchell, LA Board of Soups.
Very competitive, less than 1% difference in that race.
Okay, next.
She's currently a state senator who led important progressive criminal justice reforms, particularly for youth. She's also authored the Crown Act. If she wins, LA Board of Supervisors will be all women.
Wow. Next.
Jane Kim was on fire. Here's more from her. Abigail Medina.
Oh yeah, that's the Central Valley person.
Abigail Medina for state senate. She's a mother of 5 and at-large board of education member. She did very well and came in first place in the primary. She'll be running against a Republican. She's a Bernie Sanders supporter and officially endorsed this year. She's one of the few California candidates Senator Sanders has endorsed. So Abigail Medina for state senate.
Is it, how do you spell
know where?
A-B-I-G-A-I-L.
Yeah.
Medina, M-E-D-I-N-A.
D-I-N-A. Okay.
Yeah.
Do we know which district?
No, there's no listing. It doesn't. She didn't say.
We'll find it for you, Robin.
Yeah.
Don't worry. We want you to work.
If you put that name into the state senate in a search, you'll
Hey,
get.
all you have to do is Google her. Google
Yeah.
her and you'll know right away.
Yeah.
Okay.
And she's Bernie Sanders endorsed.
Next.
Okay. Then here's another third part 3 on Jane Kim's candidates. George Gascon for LADA.
We know him.
Yeah. He's not a
Down
clear
there.
He moved down there.
Yeah.
That's why he left here. He's not a clear-cut progressive candidate as a former police chief, but he's a progressive DA. He is first elected DA to come out publicly against cash bail in 2012 and reduced the disparity between white and black individuals by 50% over his 2 terms as SFDA. He's endorsed by Real Justice PAC. The current LA DA is tough on crime DA, and it's continued to pursue the death penalty despite Gavin's moratorium and fill up the largest county jail in the nation.
We know him well.
Yeah.
Okay. Life is interesting.
Jovanka says this pandemic is changing human behavior, which is benefiting the environment, less driving, etc., reducing greenhouse gases.
Yes. Alan did this blog titled, I can see clearly now, the smog is gone.
Yeah.
You know, in Venice, the fish and the birds are coming back to this empty city there.
It's really made a difference. I was a 6-year-old in LA. I remember feeling sick to my stomach being in the car, smelling all that smog.
Yeah.
In 1956.
And, you know, they showed pictures around the world, you know, like Paris and other places, you know, and half the picture would be what it used to be. And
yeah.
And
so all the animals are running free in the streets now.
So hopefully we'll carry over some of the habits we've developed during this period into the future.
Yeah.
Stop eating meat.
Yeah.
Okay, next.
Okay. From Blair B to everyone, how exactly can there be dialogue of domestic policy at this time of COVID? Is it to begin to prepare people for difficult but hopefully progressive decisions during the summer and fall?
We'll have to see how it plays out.
Too vague question. We're going to
Okay.
leave that one out.
Okay. And here's part 4 of Jane Kim's continuing list of candidates.
Okay.
Cheryl Dambulla for Berkeley City Council.
Yes.
We got to make sure she's reelected. She was inspired to run after Bernie's incredible primary run in 2016 and has led on moratorium on encampment sweeps and climate change policy work.
Well, because she was here tonight, I think she's a top priority.
Next.
Shirley Golub said, "What and how do we eat?" Question mark.
Yes.
Is that for a platform?
Let's see. Elizabeth Villano gave a URL for People's Bailout.
Yes.
You got that one?
Let me.
It's pretty clear. It's thepeoplesbailout.org with the usual HTTPS, but you don't even need that to search for it.
No.
And
Unless
then
I want the link to turn blue, so I guess I will.
and then Elizabeth has another one. This is a big URL, so you might need, it's secureactblue.com, donate.
No, that's how to donate.
Yeah, so they
So
want
to donate to Sunrise
Bay
Movement.
Well, this is for her Bay Area chapter.
.org. Bay Area chapter.
No, I'm getting really sleepy, so I'm going to leave, but thank you so much.
Good seeing you, Robin.
Thank you for being here, Robin.
I really liked it tonight, so thank you for all your work.
So, Robin, you may have noticed that I changed the date again for our Flip the Senate event next month, and I'm not really quite sure yet what day we want, but it seems like all the Thursdays are taken. Either Our Revolution is having a monthly call, or the San Diego chapter, who has the other right to this Zoom room. Excuse me. So they took the 21st, OR took the 28th. So either we can do a Wednesday, or we can do a Friday, or we can do it earlier in the month, like the, what did I say, 15, 14? Yeah, 14. So
we just have to get it organized in time.
Yes, that's.
Because we don't have any speakers yet or anything going.
Well, it's very easy to get speakers. They're all candidates and they all want to get money. So it'll be like a fundraiser. And if you need help, ask Mike Fox for the connections. We know for sure we want Romanoff. We know for sure we want Betsy Sweet. And then it's just a matter of how many Senate candidates do we want to present to our crowd for their consideration.
Okay, but I want the time to do it, so I'd like it a little bit later in the month. And for me, not Friday, but Tuesday or Wednesday would be okay.
Yeah, well, let's shoot for Wednesday, but, you know, start feeling out, you know, these candidates, because they have elections coming up, and so they want to get to us the sooner the better.
So you want me to contact Mike Fox?
He's a good one. He's really good at doing fundraisers. You know, I think we should have him on to help with this. But, you know, we have 2 endorsed Senate candidates so far by PDA, but we have, you know, obviously a lot more we want to talk about.
I actually want to have the whole field talked about so people understand what we're dealing with for November.
Well, I think there's way, way too many people running for Senate, so I think you're going to have to narrow it down a little bit.
I think just to have a brief little talk about what's going on and then go for the candidates.
Okay.
Okay. Well, thank you.
That would be great.
Okay.
Okay,
All right.
I
Good
love
night.
that.
Okay.
Night.
Okay.
So the Bay Area chapter wants to raise, what was it, 35,000?
Can't even get rid of you. Oh, here it is. Go away.
for 3 local funds for COVID relief. Okay, next.
All right. Blair B says the U.S. has a sad, long relationship with corn.
Oh, that was probably in response to my comment about eating.
Okay. Then Jane Kim has some more to say about Davila.
Oh, yeah, so I know. Blair. Corn is an issue. And I'm going to say, see the movie King Corn. Okay, next.
Jane Kim says Davila convened a regional task force on RVs and tiny home solutions to homelessness, worked to end the police department's participation in Urban Shield, and authored the Climate Emergency Declaration of the City of Berkeley.
Okay, so we know she's great.
Yeah. Now she continues on the same line. Georgette Gomez for Congress, CD 53.
Okay, wait.
San Diego.
Georgette
Yeah.
Gomez.
Yeah.
CD
53.
53 in
San Diego.
San Diego.
She's currently the first openly LGBT president of SD City Council.
Okay.
And placed in top 2 against a Republican. This is an important red to blue race in California.
Next.
Okay. Jane Kim said Sarah Jacobs, the other Dem candidate, is a former Clinton advisor.
I thought it was red to blue. Oh, so there's 2 Dems running.
Yeah. Right.
So they haven't had their primary yet? Is that the idea?
Guess not.
Huh. Oh, maybe it's a special election. Okay, next.
Blair B says the people of San Diego have worked much for good technology accountability.
That's all right. We'll skip that.
And then you say, will you take old people?
Oh, that's to Elizabeth, that she said, you know, we have people up to 35 years of age.
And then Dr. Hemming says you should join Sunrise, Shirley. Jane
In
Kim,
my spare time.
yes, Jane Kim continues now with some more of her candidates. Audrey Denny for Congress. CD.
Oh, yes, I know all about Audrey Denny. I actually went up to all those northern counties and campaigned for her in 2018.
That sounds like fun.
It
Beautiful,
was.
beautiful country, isn't it?
Yeah, till they had the fire.
Yeah. So you don't need any of that, all that detail that she goes into about Audrey Denny.
No, I know all about Audrey Denny.
Great.
No, I went up for her in 2016. Sorry, I take that back.
Okay.
I don't know if she ran in 2018. I think they were just, I can't remember. Yeah, she's a regenerative farmer.
What's that mean?
She believes in putting carbon back into the soil.
Oh, okay. That's good. So Jane Kim continues with more candidates. This one's an unusual name, Nithya Raman for LA City Council. Nithya.
N-I-T-H-Y. And how do you spell ramen?
R-A-M-A-N. Nithya had an A at the end after the Y.
Yeah.
You got an N-I-T-H-Y-A.
Yes, I got it.
And then Raman for LA City Council, endorsed by Sunrise LA.
Okay.
Nithya served as executive director of Time's Up Entertainment and is an urban planner. She co-founded SELAH, a neighborhood homeless services nonprofit organization.
We don't need to type all that in. Just say Jane wants this person. We do it.
Okay. She's really selling her, giving you a lot of good reasons to support her.
Hey, you just have to Google her and you'll find out everything. I don't have to type it all.
Okay, Robin says, how can we get Biden to look at the people's bailout?
We bird dog him.
Right.
Next.
Sherry asks, do you have local chapters?
Yes, they're called hubs.
Yes, Sunrise has a huge East Bay chapter, according to Hemming.
And then they have small ones as well. There's a lot. If you go to their map at Sunrise, what is it? Sunrise Movement? Is that what it's called?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, there it is. sunrisemovement.org, Bay Area chapter.
Oh, Alan Minsky answered me. I didn't know this. I asked Alan Minsky privately about the idea of the radio talk show. He said, great idea, though I'm not sure how easy it would be to get greenlit by Pacifica. So he's already expressed interest.
Good.
So if you can help me with giving me contact information for Alan Minsky, I'd appreciate it.
Alan at PDA-CA.org.
Okay, and that's probably also on the website, right?
What website?
Is that I'd like that email address. Okay, let's finish this, then I can get it from you.
Alan is spelled A-L-A-N.
Yep. Alan at
PDAmerica.org.
Okay, Alan at PDAmerica.org. Got it. Okay, let's finish this up.
Yay.
So yeah, the next one is sunrisemovement.org from you. And then there was announcements. Now we're going to put the announcements in?
Yeah, I'll depends when I send them out, because most of them were about tomorrow being May Day.
So you probably don't need them. Elizabeth gave her email address.
Okay.
It's EVILLANO.
Wait, a little slower. EV.
Right. ILL.
Yeah.
ANO. EVILLANO dot EV at gmail.com.
So it's evillano.ev@gmail.com.
Correct.
Okay. That's it?
I'm looking. There's still a bit, but then there was some discussion, the New Deal. Let's see. Then Shirley Golub announcements. Cynthia Papermaster helped Code Pink and allies end U.S. sanctions by joining our campaign to convince Pelosi and the Bay Area Congress members to back legislation.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Well, then Elizabeth Villano has "This is an Uprising: How Nonviolent Revolt is Shaping the 21st."
Oh, the book. Okay.
Yeah, it's called "This is an Uprising: How Nonviolent Revolt is Shaping the 21st Century."
How nonviolent
revolt
revolt.
is shaping the 21st century.
Okay.
And David Hartso, I think he repeats, is it worth putting energy into trying to get the platform committee to support Medicare for all?
He asked that question twice.
Yeah. And then Elizabeth Milano says, by Mark Engler and Paul Engler, a fantastic look at every large nonviolent social movement.
No, we don't need all that. Just the name of the author by
Mark Engler and Paul Engler, E-N-G-L-E-R.
Are they related?
Probably.
Huh. Okay.
Jackie Felder for Senate.org, shahidforchange.org.
Yeah, that's for phone banking.
And then the links, Villano says, the links I mentioned before, People's Bailout, Mutual Aid Fund, and Sunrise School.
Oh yeah, do the Sunrise School.
So that's, it says sunrisemovement.org/sunrise-school. And it's the usual HTTPS
Yeah, that's fine.
www.sunrisemovement.org/sunrise-school.
But they don't want old people.
Right. You have to be under 35, right?
Yeah. Well, it's youth led because
Yeah.
they want to have the youth expressing themselves,
Right.
which oftentimes doesn't happen. If they're older people, the older people take over.
It's just like that old Excedrin commercial. Mother, please. I'd rather do it myself.
Yes.
Is
that it?
No, Councilmember Cheryl Dambulla has a link.
For what?
A Facebook event.
Oh yeah, her thing tomorrow.
You want me to give you?
Day.
You want me to give you the number?
Just give me whatever you have to give me. Go ahead.
Okay, it's got www.facebook.com/events/now the number to identify the event.
Okay.
2578
2578
7259
7259
8234
8234
5711.
5711.
And followed by a slash, apparently.
Yeah, they always end their stuff with slash.
So
Okay.
it's preceded by all that other stuff.
Yeah. I'll get it. I'll put the real link in there, but I want to copy and paste. I don't want to type it all.
And Cheryl Dambulla has another thing she wants you to know.
Yes.
Caring for Our Labor Community link, and it's another Facebook event. It's the same number. I think it's the same one. I'm not.
Yeah, it is.
It looks like it's the same one.
Yeah.
Okay, and then let's see what else is here. And then Cheryl Dambulla invites you this Friday, 12:30 p.m. Caring for Our Labor Community. Is that the same one?
Yeah,
She has
same
a
one.
phone. She has a phone number. It's like, oh, it's a Zoom, and so you might have to. This is a lot of information to write down. The Zoom dial-in number and the link.
Yeah, I'll get it from.
You might want to
Probably
contact.
has it on the Facebook page, right?
Probably.
Uh,
Friday, 12:30 p.m. Caring for Our Labor Community. That's the name of the event.
Yeah. Just tell me the link. Don't tell me the meeting ID and the password because the link always has the meeting ID and the password in it.
Yeah. So the link is https:// US 02 web .zoom .us, which is also lowercase, everything's lowercase, /j /86894 275 981.
Wait. 275.
981.
Okay.
That's the URL.
Great. Anything else?
Let's see. Alan Minsky says, in the current 2020 budget, government expenditures is 36.
Well, that's way too much information.
Okay, let's see what else here. Brett Wilkins, thank you. No. It's then I had something that I actually wanted people to know about. It's I'll give you the Celebrate May Day, and I'll just give you the link. It's small, I think.
Is it a Facebook thing?
No, but it's a great 4-minute video. You know Martha Hawthorne?
I do.
She has written 2 songs. They're part of it, and it's like the best portions of the video and her 2 great songs.
Oh, okay.
I'll give you the URL.
Give it to me.
Okay, https://you2.youtu.be.
YOUTU.
That doesn't look right, does it?
No, that's what they do.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Okay, /OL. These are both uppercase. OL9 lowercase H-T uppercase S2 uppercase XU4.
I don't think uppercase and lowercase matter, but let's see.
I'm just doing
Get
it.
back there. O, like the letter O, small L, 9, small h, hyphen, small t.
S, it was 1 S, 2 XU4.
Okay.
What I'll do, I think I'll just send that to you personally on your email. I'll
Okay.
So you'll have it.
Yeah, I have to let my dog out or she
Yeah.
can.
Okay. All right. So I think we're done.
Fabulous. Thank
Thank
you
you.
so much for doing
Oh,
this.
my pleasure. It's like the good old days.
Yeah.
Okay, Shirley, great job. I'm so proud of what you've done with this PDA-SF. Your
Well,
email.
I think it was fun to combine SF and Oakland, don't you?
Yeah, it's great. There's no limit to what you can do with Zoom, right?
No, well, I invited my friend Francis from Nebraska.
Fantastic. Okay, thanks a lot.
All right, you have a great evening.
You too.
Have a glass of wine.
All right, doctor's orders.
Yeah, bye.
And that was recorded, just by the way. We're still recording.
Oh, we're still recording. Uh-oh.
Yeah. So keep it clean.
Okay, bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Are these other people still here?
I doubt it, but they maybe they're all listening. I see a lot of people still here.
Let's see, I'm going to stop the recording.